She. Yep, Elaine Gorge, she was here.
Right, no, right, no, I met
So
her.
it was-
Good.
That's what it is. Okay, as it is 5:30 PM, I will call the March 7th, 2023 Town of Breckenridge Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please, Chris.
Mr. Gerard,
Here.
Mr. Frechter,
Here.
Mr. Geller is absent. Mr. Lees,
Here.
Miss Proper, Mr. Guerra,
Here.
Miss Gort is also absent.
Okay, planning commissioners, any changes to the minutes from last meeting?
I've got some comments about the minutes.
Okay,
Mark, the minutes that we keep, what is the purpose of the minutes?
Part of it's just to document the decisions that the planning commission makes, but the other purpose is the council does like to see some of the discussion that the commission has. Now, we do not try to do verbatim minutes. That's ridiculous. It'd be too long. But we do try to capture some of the comments that we hear from the commissioners.
So this is recorded on Zoom and that's closed caption as well. So there's some duplicity there
In terms of people being able to watch it afterwards.
in terms of the public record.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is all on Zoom. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we tried because Zoom has a feature to transcribe. We thought like, oh, that's be great. We can just transcribe the minutes. And then I think we did one meeting. It was like 100 pages of minutes. So for the same, what you point out, we do have a audio and video record that could be transcribed. And then we have a abbreviated minutes that most people could read through and get the gist of what happened at the meeting.
I asked the question because several times I noticed that the minutes have been added and abbreviated. And I think in the last minute, the last set of minutes from last meeting, there were some very important comments made and some of them were made by Ethan, which didn't make the minutes. And I'm just disappointed to see that. So that's why I asked the question.
Okay, yeah, thanks. We try to capture it, but sometimes we miss things. And if there was something important you think was said that should be added, we can certainly make that correction to the minutes. So
I noticed that my comments seemed shorter than what I remembered them, but I don't remember what I said.
Well, you made some important points about ice dams and solar
Mhm.
issues that I think were important to be reflected, but apparently somebody didn't.
okay, with that, does that, any other things about the minutes? No? Okay, all right. Well, just to go back, the new commissioner and Mike are not remote. Did we check, we confirmed they're not remote? Okay. Any changes to tonight's agenda?
There are no changes.
Okay. As part of a certified local government, we're asked to take public comment on historical preservation issues in the community. With that, I'll open the meeting to any public comment. If you're attending the meeting by phone, press *9 on your phone, then *6 to unmute yourself. Anyone here present about issues about historical preservation? Show anyone online? No. So first up, we have no consent calendar. So sorry to call up my agenda here. So next up on the agenda is a final hearing on the Thomas residence, 314 Lincoln Avenue, PL 20220524. And I think that's Steffi. Yep. All right.
This doesn't sound like, there we go. All right, just a sec, we'll get this set up. For the record, Steffi Schreck, Planner 2 with the town. I'm here for the final hearing for the Thomas residence. This last time we saw this was in January. And just a reminder for everyone, this is the proposal to locally landmark and rehabilitate the existing historic structure, construct a basement and basement connector, interior remodel, and then to add a garage and driveway to the north of the primary structure. And this is at 314 Lincoln Avenue. So you have a lengthy consensus report in your packets. Basically just a summary of everything we went through last time and everything that's new. So I'll be pretty brief tonight, just talking about the main changes the applicant has made, and happy to take any questions after the fact. But we believe it's all pretty straightforward. So since the January 3rd meeting, our prelim hearing, I'll touch on the changes that were made. So the first step is we kind of, if everyone recalls last time, we were looking at the different elevations and kind of the windows and doors and trying to bring that back to the most historic and accurate level. So the parts we were all okay with the back, with the north side. The front we were unsure about on the south elevation. And then if you all recall, the east elevation, that was the rightmost window we're looking at here. So staff was actually able to find, thanks to Breck History, a historic photo that showed, this is a picture from the 30s or 40s. So we have this image here showing that that is a window. So that one was kind of a very easy one. The next change was on the front elevation. The south elevation was the front door and the window. So Sunny did some extensive research and went in there and cut out took off that plywood that's been covered. And that documentation was also in your packets towards the end with all the descriptors there. And I'll let Sunny explain that in detail. I wasn't there, and staff feels that we need to give that to the hands of the experts there to look at that. But basically what Sunny has shown is that all of the doorways, the existing historic doorways are the 36-inch width. So that door on the left-hand side, that is the current front door, he has determined that that is not historic, that used to be a window because it is the thinner 32-inch opening. And then he can explain in detail some more of the information on the brickwork that he saw when he got in there. So those are the two big changes that we talked about from last time. Additionally, we have some clarified colors, as well as we kind of Sunny updated a little bit of the garage design, got rid of those little windows that were at the top of the garage doors. It's all this brown color and this really nice historic looking Oxford brown trim. And then the roofing will be the same on the garage. There is a typo that it's going to be the green metal, but it's actually going to be this copper brown that's seen on the material sheet here. So those are the architectural changes. Otherwise, we do have some density changes. Let me just scroll to that sheet. The applicant has decided to use the available density, and there will be a below ground connector. That's also going to be area underneath where we're doing the existing basement we talked about last time, and then a connector, and then space below the new garage. They won't be connecting up to each other because there's not space in that garage for a staircase, but it's just basically expanding that basement level. Let me see where I can get to that page. Upper floor plan, sorry. So kind of this area is a change from the last time we met. All of the numbers work, so there's no concerns there. Other changes is just for landscaping, existing trees to be removed were clarified, and that's a grouping of 2 aspens for the driveway will be removed. So that was clarified. So besides that, is it just a brief summary of the changes that were made from the last hearing we had. Staff is comfortable with these changes. We're okay with the added density, the below ground density. It works on the site. And we're okay with the applicant's determination on that front elevation. Obviously no concerns on the side or the rear windows that have been boarded up. Besides that, we have no other staff comments. We do have 3 questions for you. I should mention that the passing point analysis on this now is positive 1 point. So we have a bank of 1 point, but the 3 questions we have for you all. Number 1, does the commission agree that the window opening predated the doorway opening on the southern facade? And that's that left-hand side of the front side, the east side, sorry, northeast south on the west side. And that the proposed design complies with design standards 23 and 76. Number 2, does the commission support the recommended point analysis with that passing score of positive 1? And number 3, does the commission have any additional questions or comments on the proposed project design? So I'm happy to take any questions, and then maybe we'll come back to the comments and answers to staff questions later.
Thanks, Steffi. Ethan, could you lead us off, please?
I don't have any questions for Steph. Thanks, Steffi.
Ethan.
No questions. Good report. Thank you.
Great job. Everything's pretty clear here, so I don't have any questions.
I agree. No questions.
Great.
I've got 2 questions. One, just for the storage space, if the applicant makes that a bedroom or a bathroom in the future, will that affect anything in terms of other parts of, or would it have to come up for another review? I'm just thinking like parking requirements or anything
Right.
else.
Yeah, it's a good question. It would affect some of our codes. You're right about the parking. They'd have to have an additional parking spot. But right now they have the 1-car garage and the 2 spots on the, they're maxed out on their parking. Another thing is they'd have to have egress, and they're not planning on doing egress windows there. So I think it is right now just definitely storage space. And if they'd come back with a
Yeah.
permit, it probably wouldn't pass unless we got really creative.
Okay.
Yeah.
got it. And then the second question, I apologize, I wasn't here for the preliminary hearing. The setbacks on the north side from the garage to the adjacent home's window wells, it's a foot or 13 inches. So do window wells not count as part of the required setback?
For planning requirements, it does not, because they're at or below grade.
Okay.
So it's not technically a structure. We did pose the question to our building department just for like fire rating and things like that. And the chief building official preliminarily okayed it. So there were no concerns there. Yeah, but good. Yeah, great question. Thanks, Alan.
That's it. Otherwise, I have no questions. Thanks.
Perfect.
Great
Thanks.
job. Thanks. Would the applicant like to add any? Is the applicant here? or-
Yes, he's
oh,
here.
Hi, you're Sunny. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
I guess I would ask about that door on the east, or the door window on the east side there, Sonny. Did you Steph found the photograph dating back from the 30s that shows us as a window. I'm just curious, were you able to determine when and how that was changed out to a door? Because it's showing the door, an old, you can see the outline of a door. Is that correct?
No, I don't know about that one.
Oh.
I come up to the,
Now you have to come up.
For the record, Sonny Neely, thank you. I think that it must have been a repurpose or another entry that must have had a stair associated with it. Some kind of because it's like 24 inches, above grade.
Yeah.
Yes, so I think in that case, they probably did it to rent out maybe that back bedroom or something.
I saw that you did some forensic excavations.
Yes.
Did you look at that? I'm just real curious about why we're seeing a door opening and now, and
I didn't, it's probably just like what happened on the front of the house, where I believe that they rented the upstairs separately from the downstairs. So they put that wall in between the stair and the living area of the main level. And then they put a fireplace in that corner that's there now on the front of the house. And so that necessitated the closing off of the other door, of the original 36-inch door.
Right.
And then I think when they decided to open it up as one living unit, they put that arch opening in that wall that partitioned off those two spaces.
You guys
So
are
I
gonna
think
make
they
that,
may have done it the same way in the
Right.
back at some time where they just sublet the house.
are you guys gonna make that go away visually on the exterior?
Yeah, the front door.
No, the side, that outline of the old door where the window is.
Where on the east side?
Yeah.
You're talking about? Yeah, so that brickwork will be put back in there just like the one on the front.
Okay, that's all I had.
I
Thanks. Sonny.
think that's what happened. So,
Curious.
but it's pretty obvious on that window change to a door is that brick was cut
Mhm.
and it's kind of chipped and it's irregular. It's got more gap next to the jamb. And the jamb is real, and the threshold is in the brick thickness. And the other two doors are obviously out and around, so I think it's fairly obvious that there were two 36-inch doors, a front and a back. Yeah,
And I'm only just satisfying my curiosity because I noticed that years ago,
I bet.
you know.
Yeah, it's sitting out there, where there's no steps, there's no, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Thanks, Sonny.
there, you're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant, Stephen? Mark?
No.
Susan? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. As this is a public hearing, are there any members of the public who wish to comment? Again, raise your hand or approach the podium. And if you are attending by phone, press *9 and then *6 and unmute yourself. Raise your hand on Zoom.
There's nobody.
Okay, great, thank you. That closes public comment. Commissioner comments and answers to the questions that Steffi raised. Ethan will continue this.
I have no further comments. On number one, I do agree that the window opening predated the doorway open on the southern facade and that the proposed design complies with design standards 23 and 76. I also agree with the recommended point analysis, number 2, and I have no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Stephen?
Sonny?
With respect to the commissioner questions, number 1, yes, I agree. And I thank Sonny and the planning department for their investigative work in figuring out this kind of complicated history of the house. Question number 2, I support the recommended point analysis. My comments are, I think this is a really important residence. It's part of the historic district's contributing inventory, and it's certainly eligible for local landmarking, and I hope that follows on through. I support the project. I think it's a great amount of work, and adding that extra excavation to provide some storage space underground, it's kind of a no-brainer. It may even make your other work lifting the house up easier to be able to go in from that end. So thank you. Good work.
Thank you, Stephen. Mark?
On question number 1, I would say yes. On question number 2, supporting the point analysis, I would say yes. My comment is that this is a pretty fascinating renovation because of the scope of it. And I'll be watching to see how you sister in those rafters that you were describing last time and make all that work.
Great, thanks, Mark. Susan?
I agree on the windows and doors. I appreciate all the work that everyone has done on this to get to the bottom of it, so to speak. I agree with the point analysis and have no further comment.
Thank you. I'll also follow on with my fellow commissioners. I agree with the recommendation that the windows do predate the door opening, and glad to see that the house is being restored as it was originally built. And I agree with the point analysis. And again, I'd hoped to be on the first call remotely, but plane time changed. So I had read through it and glad to see the project's going ahead. And at this point, I will entertain a motion.
Alan, really quick before we move forward with a motion and voting, I just wanted to make a quick comment that staff, we do need to amend the findings and add a finding. There is a mention on the site plan of heated paving. We don't know the exact square footage yet, but we have recommended to the applicant because of his additional, he has that additional positive point. He can come back at a staff level and use up to the 500 square feet and use that one positive point, which they're planning on doing. So we just want to clarify that the snow melt and heated paving is not approved under this permit, but they'll probably come back and do that at a staff level. So I just wanted, before we make a motion, staff wants to add that finding, the additional finding. I just wanted to mention that, if that's okay.
So I will entertain a motion with a
An amended
specification
finding.
amendment
Great.
to the findings for snow melt.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we approve the Thomas Residence Landmarking Restoration and Garage Addition located at 314 Lincoln Avenue, project number PL 2022-0524, with an additional finding that the snow melt reflected on the submitted plans and specifications is not being approved at this time, with a recognition that the project has a total passing score of 1 point, which would allow at staff level some amendment to the final plans.
Perfect. Thank you.
Second,
I can second that.
okay. Roll call.
Mr. Lees,
Yes.
Ms. Gort, Mr. Gerard,
Yes.
Mr. Fruchter,
Yes.
Mr. Geller, Ms. Proper,
Yes.
Mr. Guerra.
Yes.
All right, the project passes 5-0.
Great. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Gonna be fun.
Thanks, honey.
Daily site visits.
Okay, next up on the agenda is a preliminary hearing for Breckenridge Grand Vacations Gondola Lots Site-Specific Development Permit. CK 350-355 at 415 Park Avenue, PL 2022-0208. Oh, that's right. Yeah, thank you. So before we start, Susan would like to make a disclosure.
Yes, I just want the commission to be aware that in June of 2021, my husband and I wrote a letter to the town council in support of the master plan for this project. I only brought one copy of the letter, but I'm happy to circulate it if anybody would like to see it. It's really pretty general. But because the letter was sent before I was a member of the planning commission, and because it was relating to the master plan and not to the site-specific development permit, I don't believe there's a reason for me to recuse on this, but I'm certainly happy to discuss this, answer any questions.
Any commissioner, any other commissioners have a comment on or issue with that?
I have no issue with Susan being involved.
Yeah, I feel that since the master plan was approved and you were in support of it, I don't see any conflict. Any issue from staff? Okay, thank you for
Great, thank you.
disclosing that. Chris?
All right, well, Chris Kulik, Planning Manager for the record for the town of Breckenridge. Appreciate you bearing with me as we get set up here. Tried to prepare a very comprehensive staff report, especially considering we haven't looked at this project since the middle of last summer, July 2022. We led off with a lot of the more technical details of the project, setbacks, heights for each building, total density and mass, et cetera, at the front part of the staff report. But just to kind of a basic overview of the project, it is a site-specific development permit application for a total of 57 condominiums, 24,149 square feet of commercial space, 80 hotel units, 10 duplex units, 9 employee housing apartment units, 3 townhome units, and that is over 10 buildings. Additionally, there is 1,076 space parking structure that is also proposed with this project. The project spans 3 different parcels of land that are identified on the first page of the staff report, and is over approximately 23.86 acres of land. Since this is governed by a master plan, the master plan will supersede any code provisions that are listed in the development code. For policies that are not specifically addressed in the master plan, then we will take into account the development code that was in place at the time of submittal, which was last spring. We did prepare kind of in the upfront in the staff report, just kind of the more substantial changes that were made since that July 19th, 2022 second preliminary hearing, and gave a summary there. We also did a kind of a comprehensive item history of both this project and then working back all the way for items that really kind of set the table for land use on this parcel. We did also prepare a list of consensus items, which is rather short because there's really a lot of work that has gone in by the applicant to make a significant number of changes since last summer, as they're really trying to move towards a more finalized project. Moving into our policies, we'll lead off with policy 2, which is land use. And since the last meeting, the South Gold Rush residential portion of the project, I'm going to pull up a site plan here for everyone. And the pages are fairly slow to load, so there may be a little delay as I try and type in pages, which is identified over here. The land use has changed from condominiums proposed earlier to duplex units, which is now consistent with what was specified in the master plan. And so we are supportive of that change. Additionally, the North Gondola Lot townhomes that are located kind of in the south or the northeast corner of the North Gondola Lot now truly are townhomes. Previously, They were actually condominiums because they had vertical separation as well as horizontal separation in there. So those are two items that needed to be cleaned up by the applicant that come into compliance with the specified land uses in the master plan. The remaining elements of the plan all comply with the specified uses. Moving on to policy 3, which is density. This entire master plan area has a total of 143 SFEs of density. And the proposed uses, which all have different multipliers that are identified in both the master plan and then in the staff report, equal out magically to 143 SFEs. So the applicants have taken full advantage of their density, which they are entitled to. And through a blending of all the uses I noted earlier, at 181,945 square feet. Based on the proposed uses, there are mass bonuses for each one of those uses that are identified in the master plan, since it was adopted prior to our elimination of policy 4. And those, based on the uses proposed, they can have up to 212,455 square feet of mass. The project is proposed at 212,454 square feet of mass. So they'll have to figure out a place to put that extra square foot of mass they're allowed. So moving on to building height. Each of the components in the master plan has varied building heights, really ranging from maximums that go all the way up to 4 stories, with the bulk of the buildings being specified at not to exceed 3 stories. But with that in mind, there's also provisions within the master plan that say that there should be a variety of heights ranging really from 1 story up to 4 stories in height. Looking at first, we have mixed use building 1 that I have on the screen here. And our building height measurement, the first 2 stories are measured at 13 feet, and then any story thereafter is at 12 feet. So a building that is 4 stories tall cannot exceed, or a specified building height of 4 stories cannot exceed 50 feet in height. For this building, the flat roof portions are measured from the highest point of the point of the parapet of the flat roof down to existing or proposed grade, whichever is greater. In this case, the majority of the building is right at that 50-foot limit, but there are certain elements that do go above the allowed 50 feet, such as the focal elements that we have identified here in red, as well as the emergency stair tower. There is a provision in the building height section of the code that allows for elevator shaft extensions, chimneys, focal elements, such as church steeples, spires, clock towers, or similar structures that have no density or mass to extend up to 10 feet above the specified maximum height limit. Previously, in the first preliminary hearing, the commission was asked a similar question in regards to the open-aired stair towers on the parking structure on the North Gold Rush lot. At that meeting, the Planning Commission was supportive of allowing that exemption for those elements. Based on that discussion, the applicants have now come back with the redesigned building and are asking for allowances for their focal elements and the stair tower on building 1 as well as building 2, which I can pull up really quick here. So that will be one of the questions tonight in terms of if the proposed structures meet the absolute height requirements specified in the master plan. The remainder of the remainder of the buildings all meet the required height specified in the master plan. So we really have no issues in terms of maximum height. However, we do want the commission to weigh in terms of the provision that looks at really kind of the total height throughout the master plan. And specifically, we cited language that says, in consideration of the taller buildings such as mixed use building 1 and 2, by giving that additional height allowance, it allows other buildings to vary between 1 and 3 stories in height. We know that there are 1.5 to 2.5 story elements on really most of the buildings, but we want to know if the commission feels that there are substantial enough elements within this redesign project. So that's another question that we have for the commission in terms of building height tonight. Moving on to policies 17 and 16, which is external circulation and internal circulation. In general, the layout, bear with the computer as it loads here. The layout of the master plan really matches the general circulation specifications identified in the master plan for the site-specific development. One of the cornerstone features is the proposed roundabout at French Street and South Park Avenue to aid circulation, both from Woods Drive, South Park Avenue, and French Street. Access to the north gondola lot is taken off of North French Street and into the private drive identified here. Woods Drive will serve the bulk of the traffic for this project, with 1,076 parking structure being on the north Gold Rush site, and then the remaining 10 duplex units on the south Gold Rush lot. Additionally, there are a significant number of pedestrian enhancements that were required by the master plan. A full-length sidewalk that would connect the skier skyway that's just out of the site plan here, all the way back to Woods Drive to get returning skiers back to the parking structure without having to cross the road. A new detachable grip gondola on the top deck of the gondola that will take guests that are parking on the North Gold Rush lot and deliver them safely across Park Avenue to the skier plaza adjacent to the Breck Connect gondola. And then a new sidewalk along the south side of French Street from the roundabout all the way down to the rec path. This block of French Street does not currently have any sidewalks on it. All of these items receive positive points at the master plan, so no positive points can be awarded. Based on additional comments from engineering, they would like to see additional right-of-way dedicated along North Park Avenue, adjacent to the parking structure for a potential future extension of the sidewalk, as well as a sidewalk constructed on the north side of French Street from the roundabout down to the entrance of City Market, based on anticipated demand from workforce housing residents that will likely use that pedestrian route. I'm going to zoom in on the circulation directly adjacent to the parking structure. And that was one of the issues that engineering, when they did another review of the submittal, is they identified that they think that the bus circulation that's designed to pick up guests in the event that the gondola cannot run for some reason, whether it's weather related or mechanical. They have concerns about the number of curb cuts in such short succession and just the overall tight turning radius here, and they've requested that to be redesigned. Based on those comments from engineering, at this time, we would not consider the design complying with policy 16A until those items are fixed to the satisfaction of engineering. Moving on to the placement of structures. Since all the sites are double frontage lots, which means that they front streets on two sides, setbacks are measured from the front on the sides with streets adjacent to them. And then the other two sides are measured as side setbacks. With that in mind, all of the building placement complies with the recommended setbacks established by policy 9 and 9R, the relative setbacks as well. However, when looking through the easement language associated with the gondola, we note that there is a provision that does not allow any structures to be located within the easement. And two buildings of the duplexes are currently located to meet the language that is part of that easement. Both would have to be moved outside of that. We understand that the applicant is going to discuss that they've been working with the holder of that easement to revise the language, which I think they stated that they did actually at the base of Peak 8, I believe, had the similar language. And then when they constructed buildings, they had to get that revised to allow some projections of the buildings within the easement. So they may elaborate more on that. But as the easement is currently written, unless it is changed, it does not comply with the absolute policy for setbacks. Additionally, the park that is required per the master plan and was awarded positive points in the master plan review that is on the north gondola lot adjacent to Park Avenue in the area that I'm circling here. Part of it now encroaches into the right of way. That will need to be pulled back onto the property and out of the right of way to comply with policy 9. Beyond just being pulled back into the property, we also are concerned with the proximity of some of the features that are likely designed for young children being in such close proximity to North Park Avenue. And would like greater level of detail to kind of proximities because we do have concerns of small children playing next to such a busy arterial road, and would recommend that also some kind of physical barrier be installed in addition to those features being set back. So we're requesting more detail prior to a future meeting in regards to that. Moving on to policies 18A and 18R, which regulates parking. The project is in compliance with the specified parking that's identified in both the master plan and then also captured here in the staff report. All of the residential parking on the North Gold Rush lot is provided for underground, as well as there being 20 other spaces that allows that the parking for the ski shop and spa area that is also located on that lot will be accommodated on the north gondola lot. Additionally, there is at grade parking for the 3 townhomes, including garage spaces as well as driveway spaces. The remainder of the commercial that is in the project will be accommodated within the North Gold Rush lot parking structure. The parking that is associated with the South Gold Rush townhomes is provided for on site. Each unit has 2 parking spaces, one in the garage and one in the driveway in front of the duplex. And then there is a total of 3 overflow spaces. This is a significant change from the previous set of plans that you viewed in the summer, where there was an abundant amount of overflow space to the point where the commission was concerned about the excessive amount of paving associated with it. There's a total of 51 spaces proposed, and now it's down to 23. And then there's also been a general reduction in the number of units as well. Considering this is adjacent to a sensitive wetland area, and the applicants have really tried to preserve the tree buffer in that area as required by the master plan, we think this is a very positive move and are supportive of the South Gold Rush lots parking proposal. After taking into account the workforce housing parking requirement and the commercial parking requirement for the project, the goal or the parking structure does have the required 1,010 spaces of parking that is the remainder of the requirement to satisfy the 2003 parking agreement between the town of Breckenridge and Vail Resorts that we have highlighted in the staff report. So we have no concerns with the parking as proposed. All right, looking at infrastructure, I mean, this being in the center of town, it's served by 3 different existing roadways that will need to be reconfigured to a certain extent to accommodate a development of the size. But largely the bones are there in terms of the roadway infrastructure. That is the same with utilities that are all adjacent to the sites. And we don't have any concerns with those in regards to those, although there may be some additional items that Excel will require the applicant to kind of beef up to support a development of the size, and they are have been in talks with the folks at Excel. Kind of the cornerstone piece of infrastructure of this proposal is the roundabout. We note that it did receive positive points during the master plan. So it's not eligible for additional positive points at the site-specific hearing. But it is an important piece of infrastructure that help the project function. We also know that there are several other technical documents that the engineering department is requiring prior to a final hearing, such as a final traffic analysis, final roundabout geometry, geotechnical reports, subsurface utility engineering reports, and various environmental reports that we'll need prior to a final hearing. Moving on to policy 33, which is energy conservation. There is a fair bit of outdoor energy use in this project that has been indicated by the color-coded plans here. In total, there's 40,377 square feet of new snow melted surfaces. And that's in addition to the 14,288 of existing snow melted surfaces that are shown here in the hatch diagram adjacent to the gondola and the gondola plaza. Previously, the commission supported waiving points for areas of outdoor heated paving in high traffic areas adjacent to the gondola terminals and the walkway that is between the currently heated gondola plaza and the new gondola. And that is a total of 11,429 square feet. It's worth noting that this project has actually reduced their outdoor heated paving by 15,445 square feet. And therefore the allocated points for their proposed outdoor heating paving space decreased by -3 points to -9 points from the previous hearing. We did provide a calculation of how we come to that total here also in the report. In addition to the outdoor heated paving space, the project is earning negative points for outdoor heated pools and hot tubs. They're proposing 1,032 square feet of space, which earns an additional -3 points for a total of -12 points under policy 33R. It's worth noting that no outdoor fireplaces are proposed with this application. Looking at policy 24A, employee housing or required employee housing mitigation is for any project to mitigate 35% of the employees generated by the project. With based on that number and the uses, which we did provide a spreadsheet at the end of the report that broke down our calculations by all the various uses on site, a total of 23,639 square feet of employee housing is required. Of that total, 25%, which is 5,910 square feet, is required to be on site. At this time, 6,718 square feet is proposed at the apartments that are attached to the North Gold Rush parking structure, which exceeds that 25% requirement. The remaining total employee housing will be provided offsite with a requirement in the conditions if they go to a final hearing. Typically, how it works is we don't have a site necessarily identified at a final hearing, but we do have a requirement that says they need to have that fulfilled before they can receive any COs related to the project. All right, moving on to policy 5, which is architectural compatibility. This is probably one of the main carryovers and with significant change from the previous 2 hearings. The entire project was really redesigned to have a more consistent architectural theme compared to what was presented, where there was really quite divergent architectural styles sprinkled throughout the project before. They did give us a little preview at the second preliminary hearing, and I think that the commission was generally supportive of the direction they're going. They've obviously refined it and with this application, and they're going with a more transitional architectural design that is a product of its own time and not really trying to mimic any historical styles within the town. They have a very consistent palette of materials with light colored stone, fiber cement siding that is mimicking wood, both vertical and horizontal wood siding, metal railing details, and a variety of roof types throughout the project. On the screen, we have an elevation of mixed-use building 1. Within the architectural language, there is specific language that is geared towards making recommendation on roof types. For mixed-use buildings 1, 2, and 3, they're all proposed to have flat roofs with the focal elements within them. The master plan does note that gabled and hip roofs along with flat roofs are allowed, and does also give special allowance for flat roofs being used for rooftop decks. So we want to make sure that or the planning commission is comfortable with the roof design as well as the material palette proposed with this project. We note that this is one of the, I believe this is the only relative policy identified in the master plan, which negative points are awarded versus it being an absolute policy. So as we go through and note some of the other items here, we are recommending negative points here where they have reached the maximum total. But because it is a relative policy, if they're not in strict compliance with the language in the master plan, negative points are awarded versus the policy failing. We'll move over to the North Gondola Lot townhomes. These are located on the kind of the top of the riverbank on the northeast corner of the North Gondola Lot site. Since the last hearing, just the overall scale of these townhomes has been brought down by approximately a story. They feature attractive gable roofs, have the same mixture of materials as the larger mixed-use buildings, but they do flip the stains from vertical to horizontal to give a little variation, and then tie it in with the same light colored natural stone. Previously, the commission was concerned about because of the adjacency to the historic district across the river, about the building forms and how they related to the historic district, and specifically had comments about the style of windows and the overall glazing. We still have, similar concerns now. We think that the windows probably are a bit modern based on the previous comments, and think that that's a way to maybe tie them in a little bit better, at least on that eastern facade adjacent to the river. But overall, we're pleased with the scale and the gabled roof forms adjacent to the historic district. The South Gold Rush residential was completely redesigned from the previous hearing. Quite a few less buildings overall, really quite separate from all the other elements of the project, but yet still having a consistent palette of materials that we believe will blend in with the adjacent. I guess it's fairly still a little bit further away, neighboring Mountain Thunder Lodge and Woods townhome developments. So we have no concerns with the South Gold Rush duplex architecture. The North Gold Rush employee housing and parking structure. Within the master plan, there's actually separate architectural guidelines for those two components, even though we review it as really a complete building here. We are generally pleased with the appearance of the structure as a whole. I mean, it is a parking structure. And we think they've done a nice job of with the appearance of the workforce housing units anchoring that southeast corner, and using the same style of materials and some of the same building forms as the other buildings in the project.
Chris, can you zoom in on that a little bit? Because I don't think any of us have really seen that. So small on the elevations.
Mm-hmm. So we're pleased with that portion of the building. We do like some of the other stair tower elements that bring in some kind of mining themes with unequal gable, the natural stone, the cementitious vertical siding, just to break up the massing a little bit. But overall, it is still a parking structure and will identify as a parking structure, and does propose, really because of how long the facade is on this east side, the majority of materials are non-natural as defined by the master plan, with it being 70% or 78% non-natural. And therefore, based on past precedent, we're recommending the maximum amount of negative points, which is -6 points. Moving on to policy 7, which is site and environmental design. This was another category that had a lot of discussion in the last meeting, where we were really concerned about maintaining buffers along South Park Avenue, which is specified under both the building height section of the master plan, as well as the architectural character section of the master plan. And previously, you'll probably recall that because of the number of, trying to zoom back out here, the number of units on the South Gold Rush lot, a lot of the mature trees were proposed to be removed. And then also where the placement of the parking structure was, again, necessitated a lot of tree removal along North Park Avenue. Since that meeting, the applicants, I think, took your comments to heart and have proposed retaining significant portions of those mature trees along North Park Avenue. Apologize, this is taking a minute to load here. And so the lighter green trees are trees proposed for retention. The kind of aqua colored are ones that are proposed to be removed. But there's a significant stand of spruce here that they really designed. Let's get rid of the old. Right, with a smaller circle here that they did design around and really spaced out 2 of those duplex units to preserve. That I think from our previous site visit, the commission was pointing out that if those were gone, then most of the buffering on the site. There's still, because of the roundabout, there are some trees that do need to get taken out just to increase the width of the right of way. But I think when you factor in the bulk of the trees really along this edge showing as being retained, they've made significant strides in terms of providing the site buffer that I think was anticipated at the master plan level. Additionally, the remainder of the site is largely hard surface parking, both on all 3 sites, on both Gold Rush lots as well as North Gondola lot, and has very little other vegetation. So combined, when you factor in the tree preservation with the existing conditions, we believe that the intent of policy 7R related to site buffering and site disturbance is being met with this application. We also factor in the amount of landscaping that is now being proposed and throughout the project, particularly the amount of trees that have increased along the eastern border of the north gondola lot, where there is no vegetation currently. And with that, I'll segue into policy 22, which is landscaping. And move over to our landscaping plan. Hopefully it will load quicker than our tree preservation page. Last time, I think in general, the commission was pleased with the overall quantity and placement of landscaping, with the exception of the landscaping. It was proposed between the buildings and the riverbank on the north gondola lot. Since then, the number of trees in that area has been up substantially and provides a nice amount of buffering along there. And we have compared it to the amount of trees on the same facade of the south gondola parking structure. And this really compares nicely to that, which we think that has been a pretty nice treatment along the river on that side of Watson Avenue. And then the overall, the total number of trees at 548 is really a robust number of plantings. And even when you divide it over 3 sites, that averages 183 trees per site. And when we compare it to other large projects, it really is within the neighborhood, in a lot of cases, even exceeding projects that we previously awarded 4 positive points. So based on the redesign, we're asking the commission tonight if they would be supportive of positive 4 points for the proposed landscaping. Finally, tonight, we're looking at policy 21, which is open space. Based on the developed portions of the site, 28% is being set aside as open space. Since this is a mixed-use project, we prorate the amount of open space as we've described in the staff report. And actually, it requires 28%, and the proposed amount is 29%, just over that threshold. We didn't note in the staff report, but I will note in this presentation that this area does not account for the large open space portion of the South Gold Rush lot that is required to be dedicated to the town per the agreement of the master plan. So when you factor that in, there's actually a lot more open space accounted for. But since that was a required dedication, we subtracted that out of the developed portion of the site to kind of not, I guess, compare or kind of double count that, if you will. But just as a point of clarification. So I appreciate you bearing with me with this report. I know there's a lot to take in. Is it's many projects in one we're looking at tonight. I maybe will touch on, I had a question from a commissioner for clarification, but I will note that the phasing for the project, if it would necessitate the parking structure being built before any of the other programming and getting a CO before any COs could really be achieved on any of the properties, or having parking removed from the north gondola lot, just to satisfy the requirements of the 2003 parking agreement. All the programming on the north gondola site would basically necessitate removing that parking. And that is why the parking structure is really kind of the cornerstone of the project, along with the roundabout. Those items would absolutely have to be constructed prior to the other elements of the plan. So very quickly, our total recommended point analysis, we're showing 2 failed absolute policies and a cumulative policy point assignment of negative 11 points. I'll note that this is down considerably from the previous point analysis that I think was right around negative 40 points. So they're getting within striking distance of being able to have a passable project. And a lot of the things that are identified tonight are things that either between trimming back, probably the amount of outdoor heated paving, or pursuing, other points for energy mitigation or chargers, which that's something else that I did not catch in the program. We did not evaluate the amount of EVSC charging stations with this application, but they they've made a lot of progress in terms of the design, and I think have taken, both the feedback from staff and the commission to heart. So with that, we do have a series of questions kind of after the applicant's presentation, but for now, I'll be happy to take any questions you have for me or any clarifications I can provide. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I think we'll start in the other direction. Susan.
Thank you, Alan. On the timing of the parking structure, I appreciate you clarifying that, Chris, but I was wondering, will the new gondola also be built at that time so that there won't be any problem with pedestrians crossing Park Avenue?
Yeah, basically between the parking structure, the roundabout and the gondola. And then I'd have to look also at, I think, some of the sidewalk improvements, all that circulation infrastructure is really required to be part of the first phase of development.
And then I did have a question about the EV capable spaces in the parking structure. Would they be entitled to any positive points for that?
Yeah, again, I apologize for not evaluating that. Honestly, with the amount in here, is just something that I
Absolutely.
failed to acknowledge. We'd have to go back and see, how many spaces are actually required by building code, and then if they're exceeding that requirement and therefore may possibly be eligible for positive points.
Great. I appreciate all the work that you did on this. It's a huge undertaking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Mark.
Chris, you were a little bit fuzzy about the phasing, or else I was a little bit fuzzy in understanding your explanation. In terms of the permitting for this, obviously they're going to have to do the roundabout and the parking garage consecutively. Is that correct?
They would have to do that in the first phase.
Right. So that would have to be, do I understand you correctly? Those things would have to be complete before the town would issue them a building permit to put a shovel in the ground on the other portion of it?
They could actually have a shovel in the portion of where they're not affecting required parking. So they wouldn't be able to go to the north gondola immediately. The south gondola, we'd have to look at how the parking works there, but basically there's, with the 2003 parking agreement, they have to maintain the total number of parking spaces that were there at the time of the recording, which is 1560 spaces. So really, because of that timing, that necessitates the parking structure, the gondola, which is really part of the transportation system, and then the roundabout going in first. But we'd have to double check, because there's not as many parking spaces associated with the South Gold Rush, if they could break ground there in the first phase or not.
All right. And when recently, when we did the master plan, and they actually made the purchase, the transaction, the title to the properties went to BGV at that time, and BGV is now the titled owner.
It's my understanding that BGV owns the north gondola lot and the South Gold Rush lot, and then they have a lease agreement with Vail Resorts, which is similar to how we operated for the South Gondola parking structure, where Vail Resorts wanted to retain ownership of the land that the parking structure sat on. But in terms of the sites where residential development is proposed, with the exception of the workforce housing, BGV now retains ownership of all those parcels.
So that leads me to my next question about the parking garage. It's going to be a similar situation where Vail owns the land, is leasing it to who? BGV or the town, or how is that going to work?
It's my understanding that they have a lease agreement with BGV.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Graham could probably speak to that, or Bill.
So essentially, BGV would be leasing the land, but they would own the improvements. Is that how it would work?
Yeah, I guess I'll defer to them, and they can answer it during their their question and answer session.
And then the other thing is I looked through these drawings, as you said, this is a huge package and a big undertaking for all of us to get through. I noticed that some of the drawings were from December, so this material was probably available. And I would like to encourage staff to disseminate this information to us prior to the meetings so that we can get through this. If we had been able to go through the drawings, we would have a heads up on a lot of this stuff. So if you can consider doing that, that would really be considered of the time and effort that the panel puts in reviewing these things.
Yeah, I mean, some of the drawings were revised. I think we got our final set of drawings probably at the end of January. But I guess when we're still in the comment period and asking for revisions and haven't had, we generally don't want to like send something that isn't going to, I guess, be what's being reviewed at the meeting if there are changes that are going to be made. Understanding if the majority of it was probably set, but it's always like if someone did a really thorough review, like,
I think
you know,
you're intelligent enough to be able to understand that preliminary means preliminary, and it can give us the ability to understand the scope of the project, not the specificity of the project, perhaps the scope. So I would encourage you to do that in the future with a project this big.
Yeah, Mark, that's a little complicated for us to do, because as Chris was saying, things change. We get revisions all the time and it can get confusing in a hurry. So we like to have a final packet that we provide you. Understand it's going to put more burden on you in that last few days before the hearing, but it's difficult for us to be given multiple copies of different information to you. It's just not, it's not how we've handled projects in the past and don't intend to do that in the future.
Understood.
Is there any more questions?
No,
Okay. All right.
that's it.
Chris, following up a little bit with Susan's question on the EV chargers. There's actually going to be 3 places, because we've got 3 lots, where parking and EV chargers can be installed. Will there be separate analysis of the number of parking spaces and the number of chargers in each of the individual 3 places to get positive points in 3 places?
yeah, potentially. I mean, we'll have to review like what's required by all the programming on site and the different pods. And like I said, since that's something that I just really did not touch on in this, I'll have to go back and look at, you know, where they are and probably give comments to them, whether they're in the positive point range or whether they're in like, you need to actually have more to just, you know, meet what's to be required by building code. But you know, I'm guessing, I mean, there's a lot of detail that they've looked at. I'm guessing that they saw the numbers and we're shooting for, you know, a certain target, but it's just something I can't really even comment on at this point.
I guess what I'm saying, can you max out the positive points 3 times?
No,
Or
so,
will you total
yeah,
all the EV chargers on the total 3 lots?
no, that's a great question, Steve. I apologize. I didn't understand it the first time. It's similar to the architectural compatibility. I mean, there's certain elements, it kind of cuts both ways on a large project like this where you have multiple buildings. So on this one, they can only get their maximum number of points because they're lumping all these buildings in together. Conversely, on architectural compatibility, we identified a couple things that may warrant negative points, but once they reach the total, you know, even though it's across a couple different buildings, it's still one total. So in that case, yeah, that even though if they went individually, if they're doing site specific for each one of these buildings, then they'd be eligible for any points, you know, on each building. But when it's all lumped in, then it's just one time.
Another question following up about the parking situation. Obviously, if the staging goes the way it looks like it has to go, the immediate loss is going to be to the Gold Rush lot parking. Is that part of the required parking that's to be provided? Can we
That
lose
is, yeah, I think, I mean, based on precedent of our own parking structure, there's some allowance because you can't consolidate parking and build on one lot. And that's kind of the intent, was to consolidate without allowing them to build. So acknowledging that there are, several hundred parking spaces there that would be disrupted. That's just I think that,
collateral damage?
yeah, I guess that's the correct term for it. But yeah, we have precedent from our own project. So there'd be just trying to manage that as best we can. I think fortunately it's a lot that isn't, operated on a daily basis. So it's really kind of the appropriate one that probably have the least amount of overall disruption, except on the peak days while it was under construction.
And my final question to you, and I just didn't see this, and it could be also the volume of things to look at. Unbroken roof lines on any of these buildings, because there's some pretty long runs.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that we would note. It would be a pretty minor point allocation. It'd be again, it would be only -1 point they could achieve for the whole project, but it is something we probably need to go back and just confirm that there isn't anything.
Down to, this much when we start taking the points on and off.
No, but I think that is a good catch, Stephen.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
Soon. Ethan?
Thanks, Chris. My questions are on the architectural compatibility and specifically talking about the flat roofs. And the language used. Your question is going to be, and I don't know if these questions should be presented after the applicant's presentation, but you're asking if we agree with the flat roofs allowed, and I wanted to go over that language before and discuss that. Also, you did not address the windows on the eastern facade of the North Gondola Townhomes. I'd like to go over that as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's probably good that in case there's something they want to include in their presentation to address your
I kind of
questions.
figured that, so I'll hold off till then.
Or as I say, if you actually want to ask the question, and then if I can answer, I can, and then if not, they may just kind of roll it in their presentation.
So my question is on the flat roofs, and you're asking us, do we agree that those are allowed? So I would want to go back to that language.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I guess I would acknowledge that it's the way it's written is a little bit
It is.
awkward because I'll read it verbatim here.
Okay.
It says, this is for buildings 1 and 2. These buildings may have both gabled and hip roofs, which would imply that those are the preferred.
That's
But then it says there may be flat roof types. And then that may also be used for outdoor decks. So it doesn't say there may be flat roof types or like flat roofs may be used for outdoor decks. That makes it sound like that's a third one that's permitted. And
exactly. I read that language 10 times. And the first time I read it, it read to me that gables and hips were preferred. And then I read it again and I read it again. And I compared that to the language on the master plan allowed for buildings 3, which talks specifically about gables and hips, and saying, I think implies that flat roofs can be a
component of it.
component of that, but not the dominant component. So I again ask how we are interpreting that. If we, and I think that's what you're asking is, how do we interpret that language?
Yeah, and I think that's specifically why we threw it as a question to the group. And where I would agree that for building 3, it does sound like it's more of a component. Buildings 1 and 2, after rereading a couple times, I think it was our take that it is allowed, just the way that sentence is structured. But it is also weird that it does lead off with the first sentence.
Right.
Chris, just coming back to that point, and Ethan wouldn't know this because he wasn't here yet at that time. But we had that discussion about the rooftop decks. That was still kind of a hot button item from an application from downtown. And it was specifically, I guess, part of our thought process in, okay, the town is aware that these are going to be used for rooftop decks. So they built some language in, but I'm not sure that they built in language like Ethan says that all the roofs can be flat roofs.
Can I add one other point or question? And that relates to what Ethan is raising about the style of the windows on the townhomes. Since building 2 is also along the Blue River, parallel with the townhomes, would we also want the style of windows to reflect the adjacent historic district?
Yeah, that, the specific language, the design language for buildings 1 and 2 is not as specific about kind of transitioning into the historic area. And let me find the, it says architectural character. This is for the North Gondola Lot townhomes. The townhomes will utilize roof forms and some elements from traditional homes in Breckenridge. That design shall bridge the need. Actually, I think that the rest of it doesn't really project to it, but it basically says that the roof forms and then some elements. And I think that the commission previously took to some elements was the window and kind of glazing types. I think that because they wanted a more cohesive architectural palette, they're saying like, we didn't want, painted lap siding and something that really stuck out from the rest of the project. But those were the areas that they could try and transition in. And then under buildings 1 and 2, it says the architectural character. The mixed-use buildings play a major role in the master plan and reflect a traditional downtown Western civic building character. These buildings will create an iconic image within the downtown and will emphasize the connection to the larger historic civic buildings within the town. So it's definitely more vague. It doesn't like go back to the specific building elements. And previously they had some brick buildings that the commission was generally not a fan of, that were trying to mimic the courthouse. And based on feedback, they went a different direction to try and create a little bit more cohesion and not really have create a sense of false history on the project. I think people are worried that it was looking a little too mimicking like what could have been, but something that wasn't here. So based on that, the team went in this direction.
So just to complete the question on the flat roofs, because Steve brought up the fact that there was a change before my time here. And I'm assuming that's in this language here, where under the master plan language for mixed use buildings 1 and 2 roofs, buildings may have both gabled and hip roofs. Period. There may be flat roof types that also be used for outdoor decks. So is that the language you're saying was changed? The second part of that.
What I'm saying is that there was a specific conversation, as I recall, about the idea that there could potentially be mini rooftops utilized as entertainment type decks where people would be on those rooftops. And we were still struggling, I think, a little bit with rooftop decks in the downtown zone. And there was a decision made to specifically permit those, to pull them out of any later objections to have rooftop decks.
My question though, is that where this language
I
came?
believe
This is
so.
from the original master plan, or is that an addendum?
Yeah, this is from the approved master plan. And I think that was part of it, was there was some discussion around rooftop decks, although it probably had as much to do with, rooftop decks in the actual historic district and on Main Street. But I think just to understand the conversation, I think the applicant, as you can see, there is some programming elements where there are rooftop decks, both outdoor food and beverage areas, as well as amenities such as hot tubs. That was an important element of their design. And they said, well, to not leave any question, we want that language, since the code did allow rooftop decks at that time. And so they explicitly wrote it in to the master plan.
And it was clearly disclosed that the applicant wanted rooftop decks for entertainment type purposes. So
Thank you.
So I guess the big question that we really haven't cleared up is that it allows gabled roofs and it allows flat roofs. But do we have, it appears here in this building that we have 100% flat roofs.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's really the issue that we're skating around. Are we going to allow 100% flat roofs?
it's the question, being a relative policy, is would they get negative points? And, as they look, what I think the guidance is important, depending on what they do to modify, as they are now, in terms of points, it doesn't matter so much because they're already earning the maximum amount of points just on that natural materials. So flat roofs and the windows on the townhomes, just by being a large project, are kind of almost a bonus for them. But if, as they're trying to shoot towards zero and mitigate as many points as possible, it is important for them to hear your feedback related to the roofs in case policy 5R is something where they're really trying to achieve 0 points all the way through, because they would have to attack it in terms of materials, in terms of glazing potentially, in terms of roofing or roof style potentially.
Okay, so a few questions, Chris. Well, first of all, I don't think the North Gondola Lot townhome elevations are labeled correctly. So what's labeled as the southern is the eastern. So I was a little confused at first. I thought my orientation was off. So
Yeah,
I might want to fix that.
yeah, in terms of the labeling, like you had to look for where the garage doors were to understand which is west and which is east on those.
So also, I guess, the master plan is, binding in terms of the design guidelines for the different buildings. But it is interesting that the point, I agree with Susan, that the point that you raise about the issue of the eastern facade of the townhomes needing to complement the historic district, it really should also apply. And just in hindsight, we didn't think of that when we did the master plan, but it's a question of, should those buildings, because we've asked the applicant to tie the buildings together, but then one set has to complement the historic district that you see from there, which I question if we really can see it from there, because and versus the larger building doesn't have to complement it. So I think it's something we all need to reconcile.
Well, I think we did understand that from the beginning. I think that we knew that we were anticipating the townhomes to be a smaller building that was more in scale with the smaller scale residential development. So that was kind of the bridge to the larger buildings.
Okay.
I think we fully acknowledge that both buildings 2 and 1 were to be the biggest buildings. And to make that really have like architectural elements of 1.5 story to 2-story residential building is probably unrealistic.
So
And I think we even acknowledged that in the height section, where we're saying like, it's kind of a trade-off for these bigger buildings. We want there to be kind of diversity in height
okay.
all the way through. So I think that was acknowledged up front in the master
Yeah.
plan.
So in a sense, the townhomes heard transition from buildings 1 and 2 to the historic district.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in terms of scale and then having some of those elements. And again, that's other than I think the roof forms, it's a little bit more subjective, but that was something that was carried over by both staff and the commission in the summer was the glazing.
Got it. Okay. And so question on that there's going to be safety barriers along the sidewalk on Route 9 now. So one, so people don't run across the street. Is there going to be just we're all very aware of this now. Is there sufficient space from that safety barrier to the highway to clear snow?
Yeah, I mean, I think in
That
all.
limit the ability to clear snow on the highway?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, kind of improvements related to the pedestrian level and because of like competing interests, as you
Mhm.
identify, really the engineering departments to be pretty heavily involved because they're really kind of wearing both hats in terms of, really safety being number one, but also practicality of maintenance and clearing snow and other things, being located in the public works department. So that those are items that have definitely been discussed by engineering, but I don't think there's a design right now that's been floated that is the silver bullet. And quite honestly, it may not be disclosed even at like a potential final hearing. It may be just be a requirement that they design something that really meets kind of both requirements of
We'll have to meet
engineering and public
CDOT,
works and
CDOT
CDOT as well.
Town engineering, okay. So I was not a member of the commission and am not part of the discussions that went into the South Gondola Garage. I know there were a lot of input on that. And what we see from town is a solid garage wall of, I don't know if it's, I don't know if the materials are natural or not, but it's wood looking. Whereas this garage design is very open and industrial, but it's also going to be visible from the same similar type of, we'll see it. So I'm just curious, what drove the town, the decisions behind the town's lot, garage and the south lot? Because these are very, very different eastern facades. And one is a very industrial look versus the one that we have in the town is much more wooden and rustic, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is even though the proximity being on the other side of Park Avenue, really like a full block removed from the historic district and also having a much more extensive natural tree buffer there where there was no buffering, it was just dirt where the South Gondola lot structure is. I think those two factors played into like why the designs probably are quite a bit different in that regard. I mean, that's also partly why we have, tree buffering language in the master plan, because we're hoping that would.
So how high would the trees have to be to hide the parking garage, this garage?
Well, the existing tree,
Street level, not from where the garage starts.
well, from grade to the parapet of the garage, where you're not factoring in the employee housing or the stair towers, is 28 feet.
Okay.
And so most of the mature trees along there are taller than 28
Okay.
feet.
Okay.
But that's exactly why where I think we understood that we were working with a site that had no natural vegetation and it was to take years for trees to grow up to screen it. So I think with that proximity, that's why it was deliberate it's still a different style than what is adjacent. It's a rustic style, which isn't, kind of the more formal painted primary residential facade that you would find like adjacent to it. But still, they took that element from, the back of the Brown Hotel and tried to tie it in and did do some diligence in terms of looking at historical forms where they could, and then the stair towers. But since it was to be a lot, front and center, being right kind of looming over the river there, we had different work sessions with various focus groups, and there was that's kind of the style that won out. There was another one that was a much more contemporary style. It wasn't to be so themed, and those were the two kind of leading candidates. And then finally, the council kind of voted on essentially the design that you have today. And that's kind of the short history of the design criteria for the south
Okay.
gondola lot structure.
Thank you. And then one more thing, I think just as to recall, and we could go, anyone can go back and look at that, listen to the meeting, but when we did have, I guess, the previous meeting with the applicant, we had a very lengthy discussion about the overall design direction for the project. And unfortunately, Commissioner Geller is not here because he drove a lot of that. And we gave them a lot of positive feedback towards this transitional designs, and the applicant showed us representative or sample examples from other towns and other areas. And we gave a lot of positive feedback towards those designs, which were all flat roof. So we the original design was with the gables and such. So I believe that they're responding here to the feedback from our last meeting. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that. So that's all I have. So,
One more question.
Okay.
based on-
yeah.
Based on what Alan had brought up about the right of way on that west side of Park Avenue. And I'm sitting here listening to this and visualizing that sidewalk's going to go all the way up from the one roundabout, and it'll have to go around the other roundabout in order to get to its destination of the ski back. And then there'll be some stairs that go down to the tunnel. Is that what's envisioned?
Yeah, actually, the ski back is just shy of the Watson Avenue roundabout. The
So it's on the north side of the Watson Avenue? Yeah. I think so.
or actually,
It's on the south side.
or it's on the
It's on the south.
or it is
side.
on the south side. Actually, I'm thinking of Mountain Thunder Drive. Basically, they're obligated to build a sidewalk to Mountain Thunder Drive. So yeah, they will have to go on the other side of the roundabout. There's no connection at that roundabout where they have to like pick it all, because that's just the adjacent wetlands that are there. So that they are going along the roundabout, but they don't have a street crossing and
Mhm.
between the ski back until they get to Woods Drive.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I just wanted to understand the scope of the
Yeah,
project.
I apologize. I was thinking of Mountain Thunder Drive, which they actually have to tile the way in to allow us to remove snow. If they only went to the ski back, there'd be no path for them to, turn around at that point.
So this time I'll open up to the applicant.
Graham Frank, BGV. Mark, to answer your question on ownership, a single purpose entity under BGV owns both the South Gold Rush and the North Gondola lot. We have a land lease, a long-term land lease on the North Gold Rush lot. And then we would obviously condominiumize the boxes where the employee housing units are. And then the parking structure would be its own condominiumized units inside the air rights. Very similar to what we did on the Stables lot up at Peak 8.
BGV would collect the parking revenue for that, for the maintenance.
Correct.
and-
We would manage and collect the revenues.
Bill Campy, DTJ Design, Boulder, Colorado. Thanks, Chris, for pulling this up. Let me see here. Well, I guess this may be. This is going to be super, I don't like to say it'll be the briefest presentation ever, but I'm going to try to make this really short and answer your questions quickly. I did just include, just because I knew there would be some new faces here, or maybe some folks like me who can't remember what I did last week. This has been going on for a number of years now. And the truth is the projects, I think, has gotten better and better over time with input from the community. This is just the master plan process. We went through, this is probably, I would argue, one of the most intense master plan processes in the history of Breckenridge to get where we were for that starting point. In regards to the flat roof language, while we're talking about the master plan, I'll just note, we did absolutely intend to allow flat roofs. That's why they say they're allowed. We just separated out and then put an additional statement regarding rooftop use. And that's why it was separated the way it was, is because those other roof types didn't also have that additional consideration. So it was never an intention to, and that's why it doesn't say any one roof type would be dominant. I think it's pretty clear to me, at least, that it says that all of them are allowed, specifically, including use of rooftop decks. That's why, Steve was very correct in terms of it being kind of a hot point, and that's why we wanted to kind of specifically state that. All right, so here we are now in the development plan process. Again, in terms of amount of kind of depth and thought, DTJ and BGV have gone through not just multiple hearings, but multiple rounds of design revisions. I think the design revisions are predominantly been driven by the community, both staff and planning commission input. So we've gone, this will be our, in preliminary hearing, actually kind of our basically third version coming to the group. If you think about our original and then some of the revisions, as we mentioned before, that we shown, and now this third time, each time, honestly, really taking the conversation we had with planning commission as an assignment, and to come back and try to continue to move in that direction. I think some of the very big items that we'll get to in this next slide here is kind of, we'll talk to that. So the key changes from the last one, and again, I have to say, I think staff and Chris really do an excellent job of presenting the project, so I don't really have to do much in my job here. So I'll just hit the high points just as a reminder again. We did a lot of design changes for the project. It, I think, keeps in the same keeping as we've been showing along, but there's actually quite a bit of work that's been done between the last hearing and this time. Obviously the trees, we walked the site with planning commission, we identified some really key tree groupings. That's a huge change to the design. It took quite a bit of work to figure out how to do that. You know, and honestly, at quite a bit of expense to the proposing developer in terms of really restructuring the whole design of that section of the project. We've modified circulation per the discussion Chris has talked about. We've added landscaping along the river corridor. That was a big point in terms of how we transition from that spot. We have made a massive reduction in heating surfaces and outdoor water. I think this is a resort project, so that kind of guest experience is really important. And so trying to balance that's really a critical piece of the design. And we weren't able to eliminate because of those things, but I think we've really tried to understand the, I think what's in keeping with the values of Breckenridge, I guess I would say, and trying to find that compromise. We've modified the massing. We need to figure out where to get 5 square feet back in there. But other than that, I think we were pretty close on kind of meeting the code and goals, which we were a little bit over before. So again, appreciate staff's help and working through that with us, because they were able to help us do some live analysis to really hone that in and come here with that being off the table. Updated architectural style. This is one of the biggest changes we made over the project. During master plan, we showed a lot of design and graphic ideas. We entered this process for the more development plan specific design, kind of with that keeping forward. And we had to really quickly pivot to a really large drastic design change based on feedback from the community. And I think we've kind of come to a place where I think both parties are pretty happy. I mean, I guess we'll find out a little bit more in your comments tonight, but based on our last hearing, we felt like we were going in a really good direction and have kind of found a way to infill a site in Breckenridge without kind of being too hokey in terms of what could happen with mimicking styles and without being too completely divergent from what Breckenridge is about, and trying to find that middle ground and have its own identity, but not be completely foreign. Building heights was another one that was up. We've gone back and met all of those, and then we stepped back from the river. On the building height differentiating the project, I would just note the master plan says that the intention is to vary heights. It doesn't kind of give a requirement for each one. We've also not just varied building heights in the building types across the area, but we've also, in terms of code, approached stepping down the buildings. So you'll notice like the hotel on river steps down toward the river. We step down the edges of the buildings often. Again, a lot of that's actually mentioned in the code. And I think, Steve, you're right. We should get some positive points for not having unbroken roof lines. I think that's where you're headed, maybe. I don't know. But I think for sure we've addressed, if you look at that building elevation that Chris kept showing, quite a bit of variety in the building heights and facades in this project, all intentional to kind of honor that concept, I guess you would say, of trying to create the concern or master plan and in previous design discussions was having kind of this uniform roof, right? Across everything's 3 stories or everything's 4 stories or whatever across the whole project. And I think if you look, across all the different buildings, there's actually a ton of variation in the building heights in buildings and across the project. So, all right. So again, I'm trying to make this short because I think we're really in alignment for the most part on the absolute policy issues. The park, that's like, we just need to move it like a few feet and create that barrier. That's not a problem. But on the bigger ones, in terms of the encroachment to the easement, we've talked about that. The applicant has quite a bit of success already established in doing that exact same thing. And have already started those discussions as we were part of this design process to make sure that it was a sensible thing to do. And we have confidence in resolving that before we go to final hearing. In internal circulation, we have multiple solutions for the bus turnaround drawn up. We're happy to continue to work with staff on all of the engineering items that they've noted, and would plan to do that because we want to create a solution that makes sense for everybody. Again, note that particular issue is like kind of a once a year kind of concept in terms of when there's something wrong with the gondola. So with that minimal usage concept in front of us, we're intending to kind of come to a solution. Regarding the negative points, our intention is to not have any negative points, or not even, as Chris said, by hitting the max, we could kind of do whatever we want with architecture. That's not our intention at all. Our intention is to meet that in terms of code. And if that requires us to add more whatever, wood type siding to the parking structure or whatever to get it in compliance, we will do that. So we feel pretty confident in removing those -6 points. And then in regards to energy conservation, this is one area where unfortunately we're probably not going to be able to overcome that. Again, this is a resort project, outdoor water, heated services for around a pool, for example. It's really just a common sense safety kind of thing that we'd have a hard time displacing. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to offset that. I will note that we do have the maximum amount of points garnered for EV stations. And if we don't, we will make sure that happens in our current design. And that is both located in 2 locations. And that's not, I mean, sure, the points are really important, obviously. But I will note that BGV has a value system around this already. They essentially, I know you guys are looking at the rent program, they essentially have their own version of that they've already enacted. They have solar offsets. They have not only in the ownership in Breck solar field, but also on the Front Range. They're already doing a lot of things that the town's looking at doing across the development. So this is a shared value again, like I've mentioned, and we have every intention of doing what we require to get our points for these things, but also because that's just part of their values as a developer. So that's an easy one to get. And I think with all of that really in consideration, our expectation would be going into final with not just 0, but positive points. We feel like that we're going to be able to get there actually pretty easily when we look at that comprehensive kind of cross-board analysis. So with that, I don't know if I caught everybody's questions or not, but I'm happy to answer some now in regards to anything that's come up in your review.
Thank you. Let's continue going. Susan?
I have no questions.
Bill, just to tie on to the conversation you were just having about energy, we last session had a sustainability work session, and the topic of solar farms and the availability of real estate for those types of things was brought up, and one of the ideas that was kicked out was that we put solar on some of the flat roofs on the commercial buildings and the municipal buildings in town. And that's not a policy here, but that might be something that you want to talk to staff about to see if there's any avenue there for you to overcome some of those energy points. And I had a question looking at the site plan about how exactly the hotel works with regards to the other building that's across from it. It seems that the hotel has lobby between the rooms, but it looks like there's a more grand entry for the other building. How do these buildings work with each other and interact so that we can understand the plan a little better?
That's a great question. That's a very observant detail in terms of these drawing sets. So I think right now that has not been 100% resolved, but I can kind of give you the general kind of concept that people are thinking about. There is a discussion going on in terms of there might be shared amenities between buildings or shared check-in or shared operations. And so there is a concept currently, obviously both have lobbies, but there is one that's kind of more of the central, as you stated, that might be a universal check-in depending on where you're going so that they can consolidate some operations there. And then you would go kind of over and across to whatever kind of environment you were checking into and move on from there. So that's the general thinking right now. So that main lobby would serve multiple uses through an operator. And then you would kind of move on. And that would be the same with the parking, right? The parking's consolidated as well. And so you would have a shared kind of operational system across the whole district, essentially.
Well, Bill, that brings me back in the loop that we were just talking about with the heated surfaces. If you're going to have that function where somebody has to check in one building and walk over to the other building with their luggage or whatever, I think it's probably important that the town realize that that's a safety issue.
Yeah, and I don't know how to respond to that outside of commission can give us more permission to have more heated surfaces that are for safety issues, as you've done in already other areas, I suppose would be the only way we could resolve that. But until then, that point comes across, we're just going to have to do what we're told by the code. So
Thank you.
Stephen?
I don't have any real questions. How do you think that you would respond to the comment about more historic type windows and features on the townhomes stepping down from the motel property?
yeah, I don't know yet. I think as much as Chris says it cuts both ways, it really cuts one way usually on the code review. And so look, we want to come to a project everybody likes. We're not going to try to like fight some big battle over window sizes. I think in terms of how people live today, just to be specific, windows were sized a certain way back in the day because of the technology around how you created a window in terms of like how much weight it could hold and framing and those kinds of things. Maybe that doesn't matter to anybody, but I think, these larger windows are really obviously from a living perspective better in terms of light and also energy efficiency a lot of times. And so we're just trying to be as close as we can, but still, have a sellable and also, more sustainable and all those kinds of things element, right? And so, the more light you have, the less electricity you're using, turn your lights on, all that kind of stuff. And so we're trying to find that balance with these designs, essentially. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but.
Yeah, I just wondered if you're still willing to engage in further conversation with the
Of course,
department about that.
we are always engaged in conversation with the town of Breckenridge. That's how we got where we are. I mean, this has been as in staff's defense, I guess I don't know if I should say it that way, but Mark, in terms of we did work through some back and forth during this process of getting some revisions based on staff helping us with some not helping us, but verifying some calculations we had. And so in terms of getting drawings to Chris for review and getting out to y'all, there was definitely some changes going on to that process. And I could see how hard it would have been for them to get out much earlier than they did. So Anyhow,
That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I'm gonna come back to the roofs.
okay.
A different question.
Oh, no.
I'm assuming that these flat roofs are rubber roofs, that type of roof, and they're highly visible when you're coming down off a Shock Hill in the gondola.
Right.
My question is, do you plan on using ballast rocks, or what will we be looking at? as
That's
we
a
come
great,
down?
that's a very good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know we've thought that far ahead, but I think that's something we can think about for sure. I think that's a really good point. We're going to want to have something that look, that's our selling point, by the way. So we've already talked about that view from both gondolas is going to be our marketing window essentially. So we're going to want to pay attention to that and make sure that looks good. It'd be my answer. We haven't got to that level of detail yet, but I can imagine they're not going to be your, typical middle school black tar roof looking thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Well, I'd probably say only the people in this room, when they're coming down the gondola, are looking at rooftops, or maybe contractors as well. Thanks, Bill. I don't have any questions. I'm glad to hear that you're looking to address the facade of the garage, both in terms from a points perspective, and I think, but even with the trees, I think something more than just seeing the structural steel will be a benefit to the town.
Yeah, and I'll just note that what's shown is not structural. Actually,
Oh, it
it is a design element.
Oh, it looked to me like
it's
they were
going to
dirt.
be
It
it's
looked
going to
to
be
me
a
like
concrete
dirt.
structure, so
Oh,
that's
okay.
all more. It was a design concept,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, we can pivot a little bit off of that and start to get a little more.
Well, I
national
thought it
channels.
was just open like an airport garage, so.
No, yeah, it is open for sure, but that's going to be a structural
Okay.
concrete structure, so that won't have a steel structure to it.
Great, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So as this is a public hearing, first I'll look at, are there members of the public here in the room who wish to comment? Please raise your hand. So we just have one person who would like to speak. So we ask that,
There's two.
oh, two, okay. We ask that all, you please come up and state your name and where you live, and also limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Thank you. So whoever would like to go first. Steve, are you done with this?
Oh, yeah.
Hello, I'm Frank Robbins. I'm a voting resident of Woods Drive
Mhm.
and a board member for the homeowner association. The first question I have is, going south on Park Avenue, will there be a right-hand turn lane into the parking garage?
I'd have to look at, but this is a public comment. This is not a question and answer session.
Okay, well,
with
that, my comment is, I think we should have one to alleviate cars going into the circle. There's gonna be a lot of traffic going into that parking lot. And if we had a right turn lane, it would alleviate some of the congestion going into the circle. Okay, the second point is, I think we should have 2 lanes going out of the garage to the roundabout to facilitate the 1,000 cars that are going to be going out onto Park Avenue. If you have 2 lanes, you'll have people going left, people going right, and it will disperse that traffic a lot faster. I want to thank BGV for connecting the sidewalk to the skiway. That is going to eliminate a lot of traffic down Woods Drive that we presently have. Skiers come in and ski down or walk down Woods Drive to get to the parking lot. And with the garage adding so many more parking spaces, that's going to be a big help. And the last item, the South Gold Rush lot is zone 3 for rental purposes. Will remain 3.
So could you repeat that again? Dr. Brown's, okay.
for rental purposes. That property is zone 3.
Mhm.
Very limited on rental. Okay, it should remain 3. Just as the woods is. So I hope we don't have a little switch in hands here. and Say, okay, well now, since Vale or BGV has it, we'll now make it 1. So our concern is it continues to remain 3
Mhm.
as a rental, for rental purposes.
Okay, thank you for your comments
you.
and your suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Margaret Douglas. I live at 105 Woods Drive as well. My concern has been all along the safety issues by having that enormous parking structure with access only off and on Woods Drive. I'm worried, what if there's a fire or someone needs EMS at certain times of day? I'm concerned that we're going to be trapped up behind the entrance and exits to that enormous parking structure. Thanks to the town council, I was able to review the transportation study, and the designated area of study specifically does not include Woods Drive above where the parking structure goes in and out. So we are 25 units up there that I think are being a little bit overlooked in how this enormous development is going to affect our safe access in and out of our neighborhood. And I'm also very happy to hear about the sidewalk coming from the skiway down, because I think if I were to with my family and children, and by the second day of my vacation, I figured out instead of skiing all the way down to the tunnel, taking my skis off, coming up to the parking lot, going over to the gondola, I would just ski down Woods Drive. And I completely understand that Woods Drive is a public street and doesn't belong to our neighborhood, but it is also not a skiway. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle, do we have any raised hands or?
Nobody has currently raised their hands, maybe just.
So if anyone is participating by Zoom, please raise your hand through the Zoom hand raise mechanism. Or if you are calling in by phone, press *9 and then *6 to unmute yourself.
There's still no hands raised.
Okay. So that will conclude the public hearing. Commissioner comments and answers to, 1 second, I can tell you the page that Chris's staff's questions are on.
75.
Page 75 of the packet, there are several questions. We'll continue the same order. Susan?
As to question 1A, I am supportive of a building height exemption for the focal towers. And 1B, yes, I think there's enough variation in height. 2A, I agree that there needs to be more natural material on the facade of the parking structure. 2B, I have looked at that language over and over, and I think it does permit flat roofs. So I'm saying yes on that. 2C, I would like to see the style of the windows on the townhouse adjusted. Question 3, I do think that the additional trees provide sufficient buffering. On the landscape plan, number 4, I agree with the 4 positive points. And I do not have additional comments. I expressed them earlier.
Okay, thank you.
On building height number one, I do concur that with 1A. I think with regards to 1B, there is variation in the height. I think there could be greater variation in the height. 2A, the parking structure, I would say yes to that. The 2B with the flat roofs, the question still hasn't been answered as to whether or not, as the plan is presented, that's the appropriate interpretation of the language. So I would say no with that, only that we don't need to have all flat roofs. Perhaps we can have some variation there. With regards to 2C, I would say yes. The site and environmental design, I concur with that. Landscape plan, I like that. And at this point, I don't have any additional comments.
Thank you.
With respect to question 1A, I am supportive of the building height exemption. I think that helps to break up the facades on the buildings. 1B, I think there's enough variation in height throughout the site. I would, if I had to make a design change, I might change the hotel, which is one big, long, all the same height building. 2A, I think there should be a reduction in the non-natural materials, and I think that BGV recognizes that. It's a way to get rid of your -6 points, or at least part of them. The flat roof issue is interesting, and if I, again, not being the architect or the designer, I'm not sure I think they should all be flat roofs. When you see it coming down the gondola, and when you look from above down, you just see a bunch of flat roofs. I'm not sure that's in the long run the best view. I think there should be some adjustment to the townhomes to better complement the adjacent historic district. The windows are a good place to start. And I think light is great. I love windows, but the windows themselves could maybe be redesigned a little bit. Question 3. Yes, the increased buffering is appropriate, and I approve of that. Question 4, the landscape plan. I would give 4 positive points for that. And I'm doing it primarily because of the work done to design around the mature trees that have been allowed to stand. I think that was a big plus for the town. My additional comments is we keep getting better every time. So, I think we're making a lot of progress. Good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Ethan.
Thanks, Chair. On question 1A, I am supportive of the building height exemption for the focal towers, buildings 1 and 2. And on 1B, I do find that there is enough variation with the focal towers and the step down of the other buildings. I would agree with that. On question 2A, the parking structures, eastern facade, I do agree that we need to see some more natural materials in there. I think they're going to be addressing that. That's obvious. But without that, the negative 6 points are warranted. The flat roofs on 2B, I think that because it was brought up, it's a question to me. It's not, because it's a question to me, it's not clear that everybody agrees. Staff doesn't necessarily. They're asking us the question. Are they allowed? The applicant says they are. The language to me is vague, and I won't over comment on that. I like the design, so I will agree that the flat roofs are allowed without this assignment of negative points. But I would like to see some ballast rocks on there or something. On 2C, I also agree that the windows need to be readdressed. And moving on to question 3, I like the buffers. I think that moving that especially the parking garage, moving that back in the hillside helped a lot. And thank you for that. And on the landscape plan, I also was excited to see the inclusion of all those extra trees. And so I'm in support of that positive 4 points. And that's it for my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Okay, on building height, I agree with the exemptions for the focal towers and the stair tower, and particularly since the stair tower is set back in the middle of the building. I don't even know if it's going to be that noticeable from ground level. And I also think that with this latest design, there is enough variation in the roof lines and the building heights. It would welcome more, but I think what's currently there is acceptable. The parking structure negative points, I agree with the -6 based on precedent. And if the applicant can address that with more natural materials to reduce that or eliminate it, that'd be great. I also, technically, based on the master plan, I think the language does provide for flat roofs, and based upon feedback and discussions we had previously, I think that's what makes sense for the design direction that this is going. Also similarly, based on the master plan, that it did state that what we agreed to was that the North Gondola townhomes would better complement the historic district. I think this, following what our role here is to make sure we follow the code, and in this case, the master plan, that a modification would be necessary there for the design. For the site environmental design, I do think I like the buffering, and for the landscape plan, I think based on precedent and the work that they're doing in keeping the existing trees, I agree with the positive 4 points. And I'm glad to see this is moving forward, and I hope we see you again more than, was it 8 months, and less than 8 months from now. Yeah. Okay, so as this is a preliminary hearing, we are nothing to vote on, and I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next agenda item, since I am,
Add an agenda item? Yeah.
before we move on to that, I will disclose that I
Okay.
have a financial interest in the Stables project, and so I will recuse myself and leave the room.
You'll come back for.
I will come back.
updates. I thought you were going to ask, would any fellow commissioners require a 5-minute break?
Yep.
So we'll reconvene about, it's currently 7:47, and agenda is a work session for the Stables Village Master Plan Town Project SVC 710 Wellington Road, PL 2023-0034. And we have Sarah Crump, who's going to represent staff. report.
All right, let's get started. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Sarah Crump, Planner 2 for the record. Oh, hold on. Looks like we're not on Zoom yet. One moment. Mhm. Can you click through the camera roll? Huh. Let me try unplugging and plugging back in. There we go. Okay, great. Get through tonight, so I just want to keep us on an agenda. I'm going to review how the project stacks up against the development code and the preliminary point analysis. And then we'll have Norris Design, which is here with us tonight, and they're going to go over the overall concept for the design. And then we have Alangera Architecture here as well to discuss the preliminary architectural designs. This project is again a work session for the master plan at Stables Village, which will be located at Stilson Patch Placer, 710 Wellington Road, a tract that's completely owned by the town. Before I begin, I want to let Melanie Lees, the housing construction manager for the town, say a few words about the project.
Hi, I'm Melanie Lees. I'm the housing project manager for the town. So just a little background on this quickly. We put out a request for proposal back last April, looking for a development team to come up with a concept for this parcel that will be all workforce housing. In that process, we vetted quite a few teams and we ended up selecting Suzanne's team, Alangera Architecture, that is now being referred to as Stables Village, is the new team name. So Stables Village LLC. We're super excited about this project being a town project that is 100% workforce housing for sale for our missing middle income demographic. That we haven't done one of those in quite a while, so it's pretty exciting. And we're, I think, mostly excited about that, plus the carbon neutral and net zero component of this project, which will assist with us with keeping the pricing low from not only the sales perspective, but also the utilities perspective, as I'm sure we have seen all of our Excel bills recently. So I'm going to kick it back over to Sarah, and I'm here as well for any questions you might have.
So this staff analysis is focused mainly on planning area A, which is this center of the tract here where the residential development will be located. Planning area B will continue to have governmental uses. The Public Works Department will continue to have snow storage, equipment staging, and solar energy production in this area. The total tract is about 38 acres and only 9 acres will be for this residential development. And the open space to the south on the tract will continue to be open space, and the current uses of the Wellington Bike Park and some trail connections will remain in those areas. So we'll just dive right into the land use. Recently, the town council approved a new land use district for this residential neighborhood. It'll be land use district 46, and the density on that land use district is slated to be 8 UPA. That was approved February 28th by council. The land use district calls for single family duplex and townhouse development that will facilitate a sustainable and a green energy design. Just want to show you the land use districts quickly, because part of the planning area A will remain within land use district 15, and a portion of it will be in land use district 46. Density will be transferred to the site, but only to land use district 46. So you can see the planning area A does extend up here into 15, but that area will remain governmental use or open space.
Sarah, was 46 part of land use district 15 previously?
Previously, the planning area A was land use district 15 and land use district 1. And so that both of those designations were removed, and the entire site for the residential development is now land use district 46. Considering the density under policy 3A and 3R, this development does propose 61 units on the site, and those will be 5 single family, 38 duplex, and 18 triplex units. Just get back to our main page here. Again, density will be transferred by the town to the site, and the overall UPA will be 7.41, which is beneath the 8 UPA required by the land use district. So staff has no concerns. The master plan speaks broadly to architectural details. Again, stating that these will be modern design, mountain contemporary, with large shed roofs to facilitate solar gains. So they'll get an opportunity at the end of the work session to discuss the proposed architecture. But I just want to go over briefly how this would affect the master plan. If the town chooses, the master plan can include some point allocations at this time for negative points for non-natural materials. If you recall back last fall, we did update the exterior materials section of the code policy 5A, and we included a materials matrix under that policy. So now if they were to choose to use up to 66% of non-natural materials on a facade at the master plan level, that would be negative 4 points, or they could choose we could choose 33%, and that would be a negative 2 points. Staff does not recommend going above 66% of non-natural materials, just to encourage a variety of design and a diversity of materials. So that leads me to the preliminary point analysis under 5A is possibly -2 or possibly -4 at the master plan level, should we decide to use non-natural materials. Moving on to building height, we do have a question for the Planning Commission under this policy. We'll get to those all together at the end. But this site was heavily previously disturbed by dredge mining as well as government activities. And a lot of the dredge rock has been removed from the site, but undulations in slope and some pretty extensive trenching exist on the site. The code allows a provision to use average slope to determine the existing grade when past mining disturbance has occurred. So this master plan proposes this diagram shows the average slope across the site, and we would use that to establish existing grade. And we have the question for the commission if you agree with that approach to establishing existing grade. No structure within the residential development would be greater than 35 feet above either existing or proposed grade, whichever produces the greater number. So again, no structure is proposed to be above 35 feet, but it'd just be how we establish that existing grade, and whether you're comfortable using this average slope as the starting point. Moving on to site and environmental design under policy 7R. The entire site does slope up from north to south. Sorry, where's my cursor here? So there's quite a bit of grade change from north to south. To overcome this and provide drainage for the site, the master plan proposes a bioswale drainage around the western side and a retention pond in this area. And along with that, because the site does slope, there are proposed retaining walls in the rear area of these duplex homes and around some of the other single family homes in the western side of the neighborhood. So because of the extensive retaining walls in some areas, as well as their height possibly being above 4 feet, where staff is recommending -4 points for those retaining walls under policy 7R. But we do not have any comments on the bioswale area and believe that that is appropriate for this site. Moving on to placement of structures under policy 9. All the units are proposed to have front-loaded garages. And so that leads me into the master plan is proposing a perimeter boundary for setbacks. This is something that's really common in cluster single family homes throughout other developments in Breckenridge, where we measure the setbacks for the entire site instead of between the individual footprint lots. With that said, so that kind of takes care of rear and side setbacks. Front setbacks would still be measured to the right of way, and per code to a public right of way, there actually needs to be 23 feet from the garage to the public right of way to accommodate an 18-foot parking space, as well as a 5-foot buffer from the sidewalk right of way, whichever is first in order. So this neighborhood proposes 23 feet setbacks in the front of these homes, except for the triplex units, which are located along the private alley. And because the alley is private, only a 20-foot front setback is required in the triplex units. Looking at refuse and recycling under policy 15, this neighborhood is multi-unit duplexes, and our code does require above 6 duplex units, you must provide a shared trash enclosure. This master plan proposes a trash enclosure at this location, and it will be adequately sized for the entire development. And then in addition, a community shared, a community shared compost and recycling drop off will be off of Stables Drive in this location. For access and circulation, the site will be accessed from Wellington Road, up Bridge Street, and then to Stables Drive. And then a proposed loop road will be a public right of way and connect Stables Drive on both sides. And then a private alley again will connect Stables Drive to the loop road through the middle of the triplex units. A brand new public recreation path from Wellington Road to the Wellington Bike Park is proposed with this master plan, following the large yellow, orange path here from north to south. Because this is a public recreation path, the staff is recommending a +3 points for that trail under the recreation policy 20. I also would like to discuss parking under policy 18. The proposed single-family duplex and triplex units all will have, the single-family units will have a double car garage and 2 parking spaces on the exterior. And each duplex and triplex unit will have at least 1 garage space and an exterior parking space. This exceeds the parking code, the parking required in the code. In addition, there's visitor parking here and as well on the south side of the, in a community space. It's very scary, low battery. Thanks, good catch, Julia. So parking in our code, we did recently adopt parking maximums, which presents a little bit of a something we need to talk through for this type of development. Our code has parking maximums for multifamily units, which are 1.65 parking spaces for units with 1 bedroom or greater. But the code does not have parking maximums for duplex units. So it goes from duplex with no parking maximums to multifamily that does have parking maximums. These are triplex units in the center here, but each is proposing a single car garage and exterior space. We as staff would like to consider the triplex units as duplex in this case because they are essentially single family attached units. It's different from a multi-family condo complex where you have a shared parking pool and 1 large surface parking area. If you were to do the math and look at the required parking under the parking maximums, this triplex area is overparked by about 6 spaces. But if you were to take away parking, then you're essentially taking away 1 unit's garage or an exterior space. And so using the multifamily definition for parking in this scenario does not necessarily make as much sense. So we are asking if you are okay with using the duplex definition for these units regarding parking. And I'm happy to clarify.
Well, since someone present worked on that, maybe that's something we should just think about and accommodate triplexes down the road
Mhm.
In that part of the code.
Exactly. Perhaps an oversight previously when adopting the parking maximums.
Without a triplexes. Yeah. Triplexes. I don't know. It's triplex or triplex.
The master plan does allocate greater than 30% of the planned area to open space. The allocation exceeds or meets the open space in previous master plan neighborhoods that the town has helped develop, such as Lincoln Park and Wellington. And I did want to note that this space up here to the east of Stables Drive will continue to be open space and no development is planned. I think there's currently a pretty dense growth of trees in that area, and that will be preserved. Landscaping, the master plan does address landscaping in keeping with the sustainability goals for the neighborhood. Xeric landscaping or low water intensity is proposed. Landscaping will also be looked at the individual site level for each of these structures when they come through for their individual development permits. 2 different sections of the social community policy 24R have been met with this master plan proposal and are qualify for positive points. The development is 100% affordable units. All 61 are going to be deed restricted and they'll seek owners between 80 and 140% area median income. So this qualifies for positive 10 points under the code. It also meets the positive 6 points allocated under section B of relative policy 24 because the project meets a council goal within the last 3 years. And that goal was to achieve a diversity of housing at differing price points for locals. I did want to point out that the proposed right-of-way is 31 feet. This includes two 10-foot drive lanes, a 3-foot pan on each side, and a 5-foot public sidewalk on the west side of the loop road. In addition to this 31-foot right-of-way, there will be 5-foot snow storage easements on each side of the right-of-way. This is a smaller right-of-way than is engineering standards call for, but the town engineer has provided a memo saying that she is comfortable with the proposed right-of-way widths in this instance, and that was attached in your packet. And last but not least, in the point analysis and questions for commission, fencing. So typically we don't allow fencing outside of the historic district except in master plan neighborhoods. This master plan, very similar to Wellington and Lincoln Park, proposes the allowance of duplex and or of the units to have fenced rear yards. So essentially the master plan would allow a 3-foot fence to start in the side yard and go around the rear of the footprint lot, but the fencing wouldn't be allowed in shared open space. And then additionally, to screen the neighborhood from public works activities as well as for safety, the town is proposing to construct a 6-foot privacy fence. You can kind of see it on this drawing here. It would go across planning area B and come down to the south. This would be constructed on planning area B by the town and be to provide as much of a buffer as possible between the residents and this like trail buffer as well. So we try to place it as close to public works activities as they would allow to give a greater buffer between the neighborhood and those activities. So just quickly to summarize the point analysis, this project currently has a passing score of either +13 or +11, and that's including +3 positive points under policy 20R for providing the paved recreation trail, +10 points for 100% deed restricted units under policy 24A, and the +6 points for meeting a council goal under 24R. We are suggesting either -2 or -4 points for possible proposed non-natural materials under policy 5R, and -4 points, the maximum, for the retaining walls under policy 7R, site and environmental design. So that is the development review portion of the work session. I'm happy to take questions and then we can move on to the concept plan presentation from Norris, if you have questions for staff. And then maybe we'll address the 5 questions that I put at the very end. If that sounds after everything, yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Stephen, would you like to start with questions for staff?
Do we have a legal definition of either duplex or triplex? I didn't do a going through there.
We do have a definition for duplex, and then there's a definition for multifamily, which is 3 or more structures or 3 or more units in the same building. And that's, I think, part of the reason why we allocated the parking, or even historically why it was, but which I think worked when we only had parking minimums. But really, when you get into not even necessarily a triplex, but it's a townhome development, you could have 5 townhomes in a row where you have, your own individual parking and land. And then it really presents an equity issue in terms of parking, because to try and game it, you might have to have some units that have 1 parking spot while the one next door has 2 to get to that narrow between meeting the minimum at 1.5 parking spots and meeting the max at 1.65. We kind of ran the scenario where it was really easy to miss either way by adjusting it. And we think that, realistically, if you have kind of your own unit, attached unit, whether it be a townhome or a duplex, that 2 parking spots is kind of almost passes the, straight face test of what it should be versus, so in hindsight, we maybe should have added a townhome or single family attached category that was more in line with a duplex is what we discovered from, doing this review.
I'll bet the town attorney could come up with a quick fix for that in the definitional language. Maybe a good thing going forward, like Alan suggested.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit here is, being a town project, we can waive any provisions that we see fit. Or, I mean, really, even if this was a private development, I think we might even make a finding that it's a non-applicable policy because of a unique circumstance.
That was my only real question. I think design is in more interesting questions.
Mark, any question?
No questions, pretty complete presentation.
Wait, I'm sorry, I did forget one that I got wrapped up in that definition. What's the bus circulation through there?
There is a bus stop on Wellington Road, just to the north. You can't see it off the site plan, but where Bridge Street connects to Wellington, I think it's on the north side of Wellington Road. There won't be a public bus that comes up Bridge Street or Stables Drive, but there is already existing transit on Wellington Road at that location.
Thank you.
Susan?
I have no questions.
Actually, a few questions I think are more appropriate for staff. In Wellington Lincoln Park, there are some rules about not parking on the paths in front of garages. I think it's partly because the alleys were so narrow, you need access, but these are engineered so they can park there and there still is access for emergency vehicles and plows.
Yeah, we seriously thought through the setback requirements in front of the garage spaces, and the garage exterior spaces in front of the garage will have to count towards the required parking. But having that 23 feet allows for 18 feet plus another 5 if you have a really extra long suburban, so you're not hanging out over the sidewalk there.
And they're single car garages, not tandem.
On anybody particular.
There are single car garages, not tandem garages.
Some of the duplex units preliminarily may have tandem spots, but most the duplexes have single car garages. Yes.
Okay, all right. And then are the deed restrictions, are they town specific, general for the whole town, or are they project specific? The reason I'm asking is I know that we've modified for Wellington and Lincoln Park after the fact for now allowing some annual appreciation for maintenance, not just regular appreciation. So will the deed restrictions for this account for that or be updated?
I'm gonna let Melanie or Lori answer.
Yeah.
So our deed restriction will reflect our most recent project. It was Blue 52.
Okay.
The difference is from, I guess, the Wellington. I don't know which phase you're in, but
I'm on market rate, so it doesn't matter.
okay. So it will be the most up-to-date deed restriction that will allow for, basically, we're looking at a 2% appreciation cap, 2% real estate fee. The deed restriction requiring living and working in the county is the same.
Well, I'm just saying.
And the maintenance plan is
Okay.
the up.
I'm just saying they're allowing an appreciation to encourage maintenance is really what we've seemed to have learned in Wellington.
I would agree. I think that we've definitely learned that. And that's also something we're exploring with the development team in terms of what the HOA will cover. And we're exploring exterior maintenance through the HOA just to keep these consistent since most of them are attached.
Okay. And sorry, just bear with me. I'll wait for the design. What's the rationale for the perimeter bike trail going along the fence? Because
The perimeter bike trail.
yeah,
Okay.
that little orange one that goes along the buffer and on the outside.
Yeah, so for adequate drainage and everything, they needed this bioswale, I believe. And it seemed fitting to have like a trail through there as well that could connect from the north to the south to some existing trails down here. I'm gonna let Nora speak more to that as well.
All right, I'll say that. And that could wait till later. And then that little, there's, if you follow the rec path over to where it connects to Wellington, there's an entrance there. Is that the Stilson parking lot entrance there where it crosses?
Here, is
Yeah.
that what you're talking about?
So it's planning area B is basically what's now the Stilson lot?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and that is the correct connection.
So will that remain for its current uses, snow storage and RV
Yes.
parking in the summer?
Area B will remain for governmental uses such as snow storage, public works staging and equipment
I have a
storage.
personal interest in the RV.
Okay.
That's not going to affect my decisions. That's all I have for staff. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Let me get the other presentation pulled up here.
Good evening, planning commissioners. I am Lindsay Newman with Norris Design, and we're excited to be here tonight to share this project with you. I'll just zoom out a little bit here. Sarah did a really great job going over a lot of the details, but just looking at where we're talking about today, this is the entire approximately 39 acres, 38 acres. So we have planning area A, which is shown in orange, and that is the affordable housing site. It's 9.075 acres with 8.4 acres that will be within the new land use district 46. And then we have planning area B shown in green, which will be the area to preserve existing uses, including utilities, government uses, and open space. Also on this map, you can see some of our nearby amenities. We have the bus stop on Wellington Road. We have the little red schoolhouse. There's a bike park just to the south of our site, and then the existing trail connections are shown here in these more straight lines, and then our proposed trail connections, a little more squiggly here. And it's nice to note too that we are well connected to the Wellington, which is just about a little over a mile walk into town. The vision for Stables Village is to create a carbon neutral, net zero workforce housing development with a focus on green infrastructure and sustainability. We want to make sure that we're including healthy lifestyle amenities such as community gardens, areas for the community to gather and have social interaction. We want to have some nature play, some native grass type lawns with xeric plantings, and also some distinguishing features for our different neighborhood parks and for our different homes. Here is an existing conditions map of the most of the site. You can see our property boundary, and this dark black line is cut off a bit on the bottom. But what we're focusing on here is the area within our utility easements. We have utility easements on both sides of us. There's overhead power lines that you've probably seen. And then also an existing solar array to the north. I think it's really important to note on this map that we have a lot of existing disturbance with the topography out here on the site, and also what our access is. So we have Wellington Road here. This is Bridge Street. And from Bridge Street, we take Stables Road into our site. And to answer your question, Alan, which I think was answered, we do have this access point into the existing governmental uses area, planning area B, and that will remain. Stables Drive continues down, and we will be making a small improvement that Elena will share later to the bike park trailhead parking lot. This site does have approximately 40 feet of grade change, as Sarah was mentioning, across it. So when we look at how we are dealing with building height and our overlot grading to establish existing grade, I think it's just important to see how we have just from here to here about 40 feet of grade change. Additionally, we are really focusing our development on this edge zone here, but it will kind of spread out, and our buffer zone is kind of on the downhill side of that bench. So from there, I will pass it over to Elena to talk a little bit more about the proposed site plan.
Wendy, you're showing us drawings that weren't in our package, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Good evening, Elena Scott with Northside. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the overall vision and context and how it relates to our adjacent neighborhoods of Lincoln Park and Wellington. During the several planning meetings that we had with town council, we really zoomed out to look at footprints, open spaces to really create a really nice framework for this neighborhood that would have each unit fronting on some form of open space, whether it's our interior courtyard spaces that are shown with the community gathering zones along the bioswale or fronting to a forest service. Another important aspect for us was looking at how the connection from Stables Road can create a buffer between this neighborhood and Lincoln Park. We worked a lot with staff with the 50-foot right-of-way as well as that 10-foot rec path to create some space there between the new proposed homes and the existing homes. And even to look at the size of greens and ensure that the greens that we're proposing are larger than or equal to those greens. So really providing some substantial open spaces within this community. Each one of them has a little bit of a different theme, which is really important and cool to give the community some different places where they'll all go to be able to gather. Whoa. Not there. We're not going to gather there, but also be connected. On Stables Road itself with that 10-foot rec path, one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that pedestrian connection into Lincoln Park, connecting the sidewalk here. And Sarah did mention the preservation of the forested areas in this zone. When looking at the units as a whole, and I know that Alan Garrell will go more into the architecture, but looking at homes from a middle income perspective that have multiple bedrooms to serve growing families in our community. And also that parking that was really important, having a covered garage space for each unit, with each garage having an EV ready component. So all homes have an EV ready space and all homes have a covered parking space, which is pretty unique in our community and also something that each one of us can understand, especially in a very snowy year like this one. In total, our bedroom count, which is something we talked a lot about with council, but we are at 175 bedrooms. And so whenever we're looking at making an impact on our workforce housing crisis, knowing that we're creating homes that families can live in and grow in is really important to us. On the bioswale itself, that offers quite a few different environmental advantages for us. It can help us reduce runoff volume, improve water quality, facilitate groundwater infiltration. So all these different things when we're talking about making a carbon neutral neighborhood, it doesn't stop at the buildings themselves, but we're also looking through all the components of the site to improve the site as a whole. In addition to the parking spaces we've talked about on for each individual home, we do have 22 surface spaces provided throughout the neighborhood, adjacent to parks and adjacent to Bridle Alley. We wanted to accommodate additional parking for this neighborhood for guests, although it's not required by code, but something that we find very important. And having seen in the adjacent neighborhoods, the importance of having those guest spaces available for friends that are visiting that haven't taken the bus or walked here. One additional item on the compost and recycling center, that is for the entire neighborhood as a whole. That replaces the existing facility that was on the Stilson site and also enhances it to add composting. So this will be available to all of the Lincoln and Wellington neighbors as well as the Stables Village neighbors. We have two public right-of-ways as mentioned before, but Stables Drive, and then we changed the name of this road again, Stallion Loop. Bridle Alley has been designed with a wider alley width based on experience in other neighborhoods, as well as spaces for each one of those units to park in front of their home. This is just that overlot grading exhibit again to establish an average grade so that we have created a a level playing field or a baseline from which to measure height. You'll see in the architectural that we have both downhill and uphill units. So really providing a lot of architectural variety in how you're viewing this neighborhood from different aspects of Breckenridge. And then you can see this 90-20 here, and you can see it across here. So you can see where that central grade was taken through the site, both directions. Just a little bit more on trails here. An important topic that we've been working on with engineering is traffic calming on Stables. So ensuring we have safe crossings between these two neighborhoods. Also with our landscape plan, obviously incorporating site visibility triangles on the corners of that road and looking at where crosswalks are going to be located so that that traffic calming will be effective as landscape grows over time. Where the 10-foot rec path starts to transition into our more natural trail system area, we have proposed to flip that parking so that it's adjacent to the trail, improving the safety of this location. And that's been something that's been worked through with engineering as well. On the trail system that's internal, linking all the communities, members and neighbors into these spaces was important. The red represents 5-foot walks. The green and the orange were very specifically developed with the existing trail system and the number of bicycle users. We're proposing to create more of a walking your dog loop, and then also a loop that will better facilitate getting bikes up to this trail. So we will do that also with signage, but that was something discussed through the process with council as something that would be a huge benefit to the neighborhood as a whole and to the community that's using that trail system. I think on fencing, just a little bit more on the fencing. Both of the fences are proposing to use a horizontal wood slot, so a little bit more modern approach to the fencing. The fence that's along this planning area B boundary is really to enhance that buffering and screening between the town uses on planning area B and our single family and duplex homes in planning area A. And then the horizontal wood slat fence, that's the 3-foot fence, would only be permitted in people's backyards. Just understanding the importance of having a space for let your dog out and things like that. So that's why those are proposed, and we're happy to answer any more questions on those. With that, we will look at architecture, and we have Suzanne and Andy here to present today.
Hi, Suzanne Allen Sabo with Allen Gare Architecture and Stables Village LLC. I'd like to thank Norris. They've done a fabulous job working with us and with the town. I'd like to thank Lori and Melanie. They've been great to work with as well over the past year almost. And also Sarah, Julia, and Chris. They've also been super helpful. We're obviously at a very schematic stage with the architecture. It may look really complete, but these are just very schematic models just to kind of study the grade and also to study our solar access, because one of the major goals of this project is to be net zero and carbon neutral. And this would be the first subdivision that we know of in the US that would be both of those simultaneously. Definitely it's within Colorado, right, Melanie? So it's a pretty exciting project, at least exciting for me. So solar definitely is driving, ultimately the architecture and how these buildings roofs are oriented on the site. We will be using naturally colored materials. We will have a combination of natural and non-natural materials on the buildings. As we've discussed, we're getting some negative points potentially at the master plan level for doing that. Let's see, and then I think I'm going to hand it over to Andy to talk about the site and how some of these buildings sit on this very unique site. Thanks.
Okay, hi, I'm Andy Stabile with Allen Gare Architecture as well. Thank you, commissioners, for being here to take a look at our project tonight. This, I think this slide right here was really just put in here to kind of demonstrate this is the rear buffer, you know, with the bioswale kind of going through, and look forward to Norris working on that bioswale to get it to look as natural as can be. There's a trail system and then some buffer and the privacy fence. As Suzanne mentioned, the architecture itself is really more aspirational at this point. We're still in the schematic phase, but we just kind of wanted to give you an idea of sort of what we're going for. Again, there's sort of the dimensional analysis of that 30-foot buffer with the backyard, private yard for the downslope units. What you can see from this slide, I think right away, is how these homes are designed around that goal of net zero. With our preliminary calculations, each of these units is going to take between 35 and 40 panels, PV panels on the roof. So in order to get those sorts of square footages, basically it drives this mono pitch design. And you see that in all of our designs. They're all based around that idea that we're trying to get as much of the roof facing south or southwest as we can. So every unit has this basic roof form that enables us to maximize the single pane. It also helps some of these overhangs where we get kind of dual use, where we get more roof space and we get some covered decks. Because of the way the site lays out, if I go back to the site plan, you can see that most of the units, about 80% of the units, the roof can face almost due south. As we get around this outside of the horseshoe, we had to aim the roofs a little bit more to the west, but initial solar analysis shows that we're going to get pretty high ratings out of those just because of the amount of sunshine in this valley coming from the west. So we are able to preserve the views. That's another reason, or one of the main reasons we kept the roof pitches low. As we've mentioned, this site steps up as you move from the north to the south. So each unit basically is a little bit higher, almost like theater seating. So you get to look over the buildings to your north. The views here, basically to the north, you see down toward Buffalo. The views work around to about peak 8, and then we kind of lose views because of this hillside behind it. So the main views are kind of to the north and west, which sort of lines up really nicely with our roofs, sort of predominantly the large glass areas. Every unit has sort of this large glass side facing the view with the main roof plane facing back toward the south. We were also able to, in some areas, bump up the roof that faces south so we can get a little bit more light into some of those spaces. These are the townhome units. Again, large overhangs to shield some of those decks. But again, the big glass on these sides would always face the view, with the garage doors coming in this particular case from the south. So that allows us to get views out of everyone's deck and living room. This also always ends up being the living space on the main level. So we get vaulted ceilings in those spaces, which will be nice for those spaces, lots of light, and vaulted ceilings in the living space. This unit has bedrooms up above. This is our upslope unit, again, with some walkout on the back up against that retaining wall. And then the garage is accessed from, on this side, they're accessed from the north. Most of these units, as we look at the unit plans, again, going back to the site plan, you can see, for instance, this is a duplex unit where the garage doors would be accessed opposite the view side. This is a duplex unit where the garage doors would be accessed from the view side. So all of our units will be designed so that the garage level can be flipped depending on which way the garage doors want to come in from. The floor plans, we're working to develop those right now, but basically we're working obviously on the maximum efficiency we can get out of those. Every unit's going to have at least one enclosed garage bay plus enclosed storage. They all have a storage locker right outside the front door, plus they have storage off the back of the inside, storage off the garage. We get those views. The main living level will always be one level up. from the entry level. So you, again, you get that sort of theater view over your neighbor to the north. And so as we develop those, we're just kind of looking to try and develop. Right now, we have 5 unit types. We have a downslope unit. We have a flat lot unit that goes around inside. We have an upslope unit. There's a few single families, and then we have the triplex units in the middle. And the architecture is similar. Again, we're working with color palettes right now. We want to develop a few different color palettes that we can sprinkle across the site so that nothing gets repetitive. And also, as Suzanne mentioned, working with some percentage of non-natural siding that will be designed to look like a wood siding typically. We do have some metal wainscot. And then on the townhomes, we have introduced some metal siding as well to kind of differentiate those from the duplexes and single family homes. So that gives you kind of an overview of where we're headed with the architecture. We're going to continue to refine these floor plans and elevations based on your feedback. And as we get into the construction drawings with our engineers, I'm sure things will end up changing a little bit. But that's sort of what we're shooting for. I'll leave that up on the screen. And if you guys want to ask us any questions about the architecture or the landscaping, we're all here. Thank you.
This is actually a work session, so we don't have to go in order. So anyone questions for?
Alan, I just had one thing. Just to clarify, I think we've written this so that when these come back, they're not going to come to the planning commission, the individual units. It's all going to be administratively reviewed by staff. So you won't be seeing the detailed final architectural plans on these.
Well, I'll start off. What's the number of bed and baths like for each unit? Single, duplex, triplex? Or
We have a full matrix, but basically they're 2 and 3 bedrooms, 2.5.
okay. The question I raised before about the perimeter bike trail and walk trail. I think it's great to be able to have access to that without having to walk along a road like Stables Road, which is pretty quiet, but with 61 families coming in, it'll probably have a little more traffic. But I'm just wondering for those units that are along there, they're going to lose some privacy, which would be an advantage for buying those units. So I'm just curious about the rationale, because you can access the town bike trails just by going a little bit further up Stables Road or Stables Drive, whichever it is.
Sure. So with it, that's a 30-foot wide buffer. And so we want to be able to provide public amenities around the community wherever we can. Connecting from the park space in this location was also part of our goal there. So having that natural, surface trail on the back of lot was something that we wanted to incorporate. Part of that also was something we talked about with council. So having that looping system, like I mentioned, that kind of bike option versus the walking option was one of the things that we were trying to accommodate there. Yeah, that's why it grew to the 30-foot width. We provided some examples to council showing how that can be really nice, space in between, incorporated with the bioswale. So, and a pretty heavy tree buffer. So,
But the tree buffer is on the unpopulated side, not on the.
To buffer, like, I think what town council did was perhaps have big equipment, because they have big equipment moving snow.
Oh, I
and
see.
all
Okay.
boulders, all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff back there, right in somebody's backyard. So I
Mhm.
think they wanted to create sort of buffer and also add additional lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
There is still a backyard between the house and that buffer as well, that would be private, and folks could create their own buffer in that space as well.
Not right up against the 30-foot buffer. There's a buffer to the buffer.
Mhm.
Okay. Double buffer. Okay. Thank you.
term.
We're going to be asked about the grading. I'm very confused by this site plan. I'm used to seeing a site plan with grade contours on it. So in order to establish this site before you start any construction, are you going to establish a grade so that there's a consistent grade all the way through? Or are you going to do it lot by lot? How is that going to work?
This is an overlap. Whoa, this is an overlap grading plan. So this is to establish, this is 40 feet of grade change shown here that we've mentioned a few times. And this establishes a consistent grade across the entire site. This is that same area. And so then you can see the undulation and the just general disturbance we have from the decades of dredging and then government use and development of all of the utilities. So this is the overlap grading plan that establishes that consistent average grade for us to measure height from. Yeah, these are five. These are
I'm
fives.
used to seeing a site plan with the grades on it and when they put the street in, that's the grade they're going to work to. And so this is just confusing to me.
I don't think that this is the overlap grading plan. This is just establishing the average slope. So they took the topo lines and basically like made them straight on this. And then the overlap, this will establish what the existing grade is measured from. The overlap grading is different.
So between this and your first question, I'm just confused.
So our code right now allows a 35-foot height limitation, and you must measure from the greater point, which is either existing grade or proposed grade. There is an exception in the code to use an established existing grade on sites that have lots of previous site disturbance by using the average slope. So we're saying that this site has lots of previous disturbance, obvious evidence of mining activity. So we're establishing an average slope to use as the existing grade. This will not be the proposed final grade or the overlap grading. This is just showing the average grade on the site to use as the established existing grade.
So
Exactly.
This is a tool to extrapolate what the height is, the height limitation is? Is that where we're
Exactly.
Going with this?
If we use this as the established existing grade, yes.
That'll also determine the retaining wall, whether or not they're in compliance or not, from this basis of the average.
We would measure any structure from the average existing grade if we use this as the established average existing grade, yes.
And Mark, and to give you a little context of, we've done this before on some other sites. We've done this actually a lot up at the base of Peak 8, where there's sites where they kind of dug into the hillside. Probably the one that would make the most sense because it hasn't been developed yet is at, if you're familiar with the admin building site, how they has like a benched large parking lot out there. And obviously that was cut out when they developed that site. And so when we've reviewed projects in that area, we took an average, like our historical grade through there, where we were able, the developer was able to extrapolate the contours from where there's still part of the hill there and kind of bring them out to the grade within the slope. So we do use it from time to time.
I just wanted to clarify that that's not the proposed grade or the overlap grading. That's just establishing the average grade.
As a tool to, a benchmark tool.
Exactly.
Got it.
I have a question for Suzanne or Andy. Well, they're Andy back there. Some of these roofs cantilever back towards each other and create a valley. Still here, and maybe Mark's got this covered, but is that going to create any issues for snow and water and?
It actually helps us because it helps us to
coming off the front where you've got, you know, parking and access, or where you've got off the other side where you've got decks and patios and yard, we get to put it right there in the middle. And yeah, we'll have to cricket it. So there'll be a big cricket in there that you wouldn't see from anywhere other than maybe this view. But yeah, it allows us to direct that to a very pinpoint spot where all that snow will run off the roof and not cause any issues.
Any more questions for? No. Great. Well, thank you very much. It's great. We appreciate all the large photos and everything.
I think these will be really nice looking homes. Is there any idea what your target price for these units are going to be?
So we're 80%. So like all the townhomes are. Change like 50 cents.
So right now, the price points are between 366,000 and about 769,000 for the single family 4 bedrooms.
So we're really trying to hit the middle.
Sure.
It's not the 60. Some of those units are pretty nice, pretty.
Okay, so everyone ready to answer Sarah's questions or staff's questions?
Page 160.
Yes, why don't you start? Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
Question number 1, I agree with the methodology that you're using to establish existing grade, and it's consistent, as Chris says, with precedent that we've used in the past. Question number 2, I agree that it makes more sense to call the triplex units duplex units. I guess my preference would be to make a quick fix to the legal definitions in the code, but since it is a town project, they can do what they want. That's going to happen. Question number 3, I think the fencing's okay. I'm not a big fence lover, but I can understand the need to create some better buffering from the various uses out there. And I like the more contemporary horizontal fencing. No, I think it's well thought out. Question number 4, well thought out. I like the idea that, you know, you're stepping down, one view looks over the top of another view and everybody gets something that's unique. The architectural designs are interesting, compelling. I think they'll be really pretty and attractive homes.
Thank you. Mark?
Now that I understand the methodology of the grades, I agree that that makes sense. I do agree that the decision you've made with regards to the triplex units and parking is appropriate. I do support the proposed fencing. I think they do have fencing in Wellington and Lincoln Park. Is that correct? Yeah. So it'd be consistent with that. I don't have any specific comments about the master plan. I'm not a huge fan of Mountain Modern, as you know. And I think that these are going to be very appropriate for the site and the purpose. I would just make a general comment that I just hope that the architecture in Breckenridge doesn't turn into something that we're doing to comply with the sustainability. Because I think architecture should stand on its own. We have an architectural tradition here in Breckenridge. And when I look at these, they don't say Breckenridge to me. And that is disappointing to me, but I understand that this is a great thing to do, both net zero and carbon neutral. So I applaud what you're doing, but that's my personal feelings.
Thank you, Mark. Susan?
I am fine with the methodology used to establish the existing grade. I like the idea of considering the triplex units like the duplex units for parking. I think otherwise it would be a problem. I'm fine with the proposed fencing. And I understand Mark's comments about the Mountain Modern, but I think that for this project, it works. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Susan. So number one, I don't have any concerns with the methodology used for the grading. And I agree with considering the triplex like duplex units, because I think parking is important and everyone deserves to be able to park 2 spots at their home, park 2 cars. I support the fencing proposal and the buffering. I would suggest maybe as the designers, you walk through the Wellington path that goes the upper part of Wellington just to see how that's buffered when it gets close to the house, and down around Corkscrew and Vista. I know there's one path that's very exposed to Vista along Wellington Road. So anything you could do to provide privacy to those homes, I think would be greatly appreciated by the owners. And I think it's a great plan. I think you guys did a great job, and I applaud you for the goals of net zero and being carbon neutral. I think it's excellent. So looking forward to seeing it built quickly. And a great job in presentation, and Sarah as well.
Everybody for your comments.
Everything you need?
I think so. Did you guys get a lot of feedback? Good enough? Okay. Thank you.
Ethan's watching from somewhere, so Ethan, you can come back. If you guys see Ethan out there, could you send him back in, please?
Well, exactly. It's great that they're saying that the BGV thing is transitional, but people run is transitional back then.
Okay, so
Good
not
good
anyone who's
architecture
here to,
needs to
like,
be
comment.
commented, and I don't know how to suggest that they tweak it in that manner. but,
Okay, go.
Everybody's got different things. They asked for my opinion, so I can't.
Yeah. What is interesting, you go from Wellington to Lincoln Park to this.
Three different areas.
You're
and they're-
seeing a progression.
Yeah, you are seeing that architectural
The
progression.
next one will be flying saucers or something.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm approaching my expiration date, so I'm not gonna worry about it too much.
So I think we are up to town council updates.
All right. Steffi, what was it? 8:54 versus?
You have 8 minutes for yourself.
We did a little lottery on what time this meeting would end,
Oh, okay.
and I guessed 9:10. So I think I'm
Won?
gonna win.
Who won?
If he can drag it out for the next 10 minutes.
I can make it exact to them.
8 minutes?
Yeah.
Talking to me till 11 o'clock.
4, I do town council report. I just want to, some of you have probably heard, but unfortunately Steffi's going to be leaving us. And yeah, moving to the Denver area, little life change. And, but it's just been an absolute joy having her here in the office for the last 2 years. And she's made a lot of great friends here. We're gonna miss her a ton. Yeah, it's just been wonderful having her. And so, anyway, just, I don't know. Thanks for all your hard work, Steffi.
What are you gonna do?
I don't have anything lined up. I'll let you know.
You got it.
No, I'll
And we'll
miss
see
all
you
of
at Saving Places every year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's been a pleasure, seriously. You're all amazing. people.
I'll miss you on two hats.
Yep, we can't replace her. So
Good luck.
anyway, she's one of a kind.
Mhm.
But I know she's gonna do awesome wherever she goes. So anyway, we're excited for her and to find out what her next adventure is in her journey. Let's see, at the council last week, there was a couple things. I will tell you that there was a plastic pollution ordinance and the council was pretty aggressive. It was gonna basically say that all plastic bottles had to be eliminated from stores. Now, there's gonna be over a year, like July 2024 until that happened. The council wants to make a pretty solid statement about that. There's been some pushback from, as you might imagine, from like City Market and some of the other industry folks. And so they're gonna do some more stakeholder engagement on that. So they actually failed that ordinance. They denied it. Then what they said is come back with a plastic water bottle ordinance and we'll adopt it. So, I mean, they still have to go through 2 hearings, but that's gonna start at their next meeting, I think next week. So their intent is to prohibit plastic water bottles right away, which was the main genesis of this whole thing. Jeffrey Bergeron's been on this mission for 10 years, and he's finally got a council that's absolutely supportive of that. And, but then there's gonna be further discussions about all those other plastic, soda, everything else that goes in
Well, that's
plastic.
almost an impossible thing to resolve because there's so many products at the grocery store that only come in plastic bottles. So if we eliminate everything that's manufactured, some of those products don't come in glass bottles. I would prefer to buy glass, but if you can't buy them, does that mean you can't get them at the grocery store? We'll have to go to Frisco or some other place to buy a product that we like in our kitchen?
Yeah, and that's the exact discussion that they want to have with the
Because
stakeholders group.
that's
to
kind of
talk
absurd.
through. Yeah. But the one thing that like Jesse Burley will remind everyone is like all this stuff at one point wasn't in plastic bottles. A lot of it. And so,
Hard
it's
to get that genie back in the bottle.
so it'll be an interesting discussion on the other piece, but the council likes the idea of pushing the envelope on this one. So, but they are gonna think that one through a little more. So thought you'd find that interesting. The amendments, Steffi took the amendments through on 3A, which density, it was just I think we mentioned this before, just a few exceptions, like in the Wellington neighborhood for bonus rooms and carriage houses for density for those to make sure that that was still allowed. And then a waiver of 500 square feet in the historic district for like outbuildings, garages, things like that. Because council had gotten rid of basically all mass bonuses several months ago. So we made some minor modifications there. The other thing they did was the nonconformity provision that some of you may be aware of, but where if a building burned down, like this happened with the 10 Mile Conference Room, when that collapsed, it actually had to come in front of the Planning Commission. Steve would have been on at that point. Planning Commission had to approve to rebuild that because we have provision in the code that says if it's destroyed by more than 50%, it's up to the Planning Commission to decide if we'll let it get rebuilt how it was before. And even though that seems reasonable, the reason for that provision is to allow for potentially us to get things more into conformity. So if we had some building that was way out of whack and we wanted it to be more in character with the area, we could allow that. Anyway, the council is kind of saying now that really they'd like to just allow people to rebuild to the extent that they had previously. And so that's what the change is going to be. So it wouldn't have to come to the planning commission anymore for that approval. So then the gondola lots master plan, I think I mentioned this several weeks ago, but first reading was held to extend for 6 months the vesting on that. So it just gives them a little more time with vesting on the project. TDR prices were increased jointly, both the BOCC, Board of County Commissioners, and the council last week on the same day approved raising the price of TDRs from about 95,000 per TDR to 237,000 per TDR. So it's a massive jump. It's warranted in terms of what the value of backcountry land is, but it is a big jump. So that was approved as well. The last thing I probably mention at this point in time is that probably most of you have heard, but Elaine Gort was appointed as our new planning commissioner to fill Tanya's term. Unfortunately, Elaine was sick today, so she couldn't make the very first meeting. She was very excited to come. And she was calling and contacting Chris as late as midnight last night. Hey, I think I still might be able to make it, but we're glad she stayed home and kept healthy. So anyway, at that, it is 9:10.
Questions? I'm not done.
We have 10:02 for me to win.
10:02. Oh. Any other issues or questions to raise? Okay. So, I'm just gonna wait till it goes to 9/11. Okay, so the March 7th, 2023 Town of Breckenridge Planning Commission meeting is now adjourned.